You wake before the sky has softened, when the last of the night is still clinging to the walls. The courtyard spreads before you in silence, the kind of silence that hums in your ears until the first call breaks it. A musician's voice carries across the rooftops, wavering and steady at once, slipping through lattice windows and settling into corners. The sound does not rush, it drifts, floating above the tiled roofs, as though it has all the time in the world. You stand quietly, as though you are listening for more than words. The stones beneath your sandals are cool and faintly damp, gathering dew in their cracks. You shift your weight from heel to heel, letting the spear lean a little against your arm. The spear is as ordinary to you now as a staff, its wood smoothed from countless hours of resting in the same grip. Your eyes linger on the gate, though no one comes this early. A donkey brays in the distance, faint enough to sound like a memory, and then even that fades into stillness again. The courtyard itself feels larger in these early hours. Without the footsteps of servants or the creak of doors, the space seems stretched and hollow. A small fountain at the center makes the only sound, the regular drip of water sliding from one stone lip to another. The sound is neither hurried nor loud, just drip, pause, drip. You find yourself counting without meaning to, and then losing count just as easily. In the upper chambers, the house of the widow rests behind closed shutters. No lamps burn there now. She favors oil carefully, never wasteful. You imagine her wrapped still in the folds of a cover, her breathing slow, the faint rustle of cloth shifting against cloth. You imagine it not because you are eager, but because the mind will always fill an empty silence with something. The first color begins to seep into the sky, a blue that looks more like faded charcoal than proper light. You notice how the outline of the palms beyond the wall starts to sharpen, fronds stretching upward as though restless from their own night of stillness. A bird makes one tentative chirp, then falls silent as though reconsidering. The air holds a chill that will not last, a chill that you savor while it lingers. The smell of the city in these hours is different. No market smoke yet, no hot iron, no crowds, just stone and dust and the faint sweetness that sometimes drifts in from far gardens. You draw it in without thought, letting the air settle heavy and slow in your chest. You look toward the great gate once more, but there is nothing yet. Only you, the stone, the slow drip of the fountain, and the voice of prayer still stretching across rooftops. You lean a little against the wall, feeling its roughness press into your shoulder. It grounds you, keeps you steady, reminds you that the hours will crawl forward whether you rush them or not. The courtyard will wake, the widow will stir, the house will rattle with motion, but for now it is only this. The courtyard before dawn, a watchman standing quietly, and a city just beginning to remember itself. You remain at your post by the gate, the spear once more balanced in your palm. The first pale light stretches down across the stones, touching the tiles of the courtyard in slow measure. Your eyes do not strain. They simply follow the light as it creeps forward, polite, unhurried, indifferent to your watch. You think of how many mornings you have stood here, and how each one feels almost the same, yet you notice the smallest differences, as if sameness itself invites careful attention. The gate towers above you, thick wood, bound by iron straps, its surface marked with scratches from years of use. You rest your palm against the grain, the wood warmer now than it was in the cold of night. Beyond the gate lies the narrow lane of Cairo, not yet crowded, but not empty either. A merchant coughs as he pulls a shutter open. The rattle of wood echoes down the street, followed by a low voice muttering at a stubborn hinge. You hear the sound as if it is meant only for you, a reminder that the city has begun. A lantern still hangs at the arch, though its light is feeble now. Its oil nearly gone, the flame flickers weakly, bowing to the new sun. You lift your hand to steady it, though the lantern needs no help. It is habit more than duty. You think about how much of your service feels like this, small motions repeated endlessly, never noticed but somehow essential. You lean back again, watching the beam of sun widen across the courtyard floor. A boy leads a donkey past, the animal's hooves striking the cobbles with hollow rhythm. The boy glances up at you, then away again, as though your presence is just another post in the wall. You nod out of courtesy, though he does not see. The donkey shifts its head, ears flicking, eyes dull with morning heaviness. You follow them with your gaze until they disappear around the bend. Behind you, the house still rests. You sense, rather than hear, the stirrings of movement inside. A shutter creaks faintly, then stills. A wooden beam shifts in its frame. You straighten yourself without thinking, though no one calls your name. You imagine her there, behind those walls, awake but not yet stepping out. You let the thought pass quietly, as though it were no more than the drifting of dust. The city outside grows louder in its own way. A peddler calls once, his voice half-hearted, too early to sound insistent. Another door slams shut, then opens again as if reconsidered. Two women laugh somewhere across the lane, a light laugh quickly swallowed by the thickness of the morning air. The sounds come and go, never reaching frenzy, never reaching silence, a middle place you know well. You breathe steadily, shifting your grip on the spear just to feel the wood. Its weight is constant, reminding you of what is expected, though the task itself rarely changes. Guard at the gate, eyes on the lane, ears tuned to sounds that repeat each day. You accept it, not with pride, not with disdain, simply as you would accept the sun rising or the stone beneath your feet. The lantern's flame finally gives out with a sigh of smoke. A small curl rises, twisting in the slant of light, and then it disappears. You do not bother to relight it. The day has taken over, and you stand in your place, watching, waiting, leaning on your spear, as Cairo wakes at its own pace. You hear the first careful steps across the tiles, soft against stone, lighter than the shuffle of a servant. The widow moves slowly, the faint swish of her garment brushing the floor as she crosses the courtyard. You keep your eyes forward, as a guard is supposed to, though the sound draws your attention like water filling a vessel. Her veil is not drawn tight. It slips a little, loose across her shoulder, the fabric thin enough to catch the morning light. She carries a copper jug balanced against her hip, her fingers wrapped around the handle in a way that suggests habit more than effort. The metal reflects dull gold where the sun strikes it, and the light flickers across the ground with each step. You hear the faintest clink when her ring touches the handle, a sound only noticeable in the morning's quiet. She does not hurry. Her steps are measured, unbothered by the possibility of being observed. The courtyard belongs to her, and you are merely its extension, a piece of its wall that happens to breathe. She walks toward the fountain, its water spilling in a rhythm you have counted 100 times before. The basin waits, wide and shallow, its surface trembling at the steady drip. She kneels beside it, not lowering herself hastily, but folding her body into the motion, as though the stones themselves are familiar companions. The jug tips. You watch the arc of water pour, clear and simple, the stream glinting in the air before it breaks into ripples against the basin. Steam rises faintly in the coolness of dawn, though the water is not hot. It is only the meeting of different airs, warm from stone, cool from sky. The steam curls upward and vanishes. She waits, watching the jug empty, her face turned slightly away. You notice the sound more than the sight, the liquid's steady rush, the hollow splash, the pause as she lifts the jug again to adjust her grip. It fills the courtyard with a presence larger than its size. Even your own breathing seems louder in response, though you try to soften it, to keep it quiet, as though she might hear and care. Her veil slips further when she leans, revealing dark hair pressed close to her temple, smooth and without ornament this early in the day. The jug is set beside her with a muted thud. She dips her hand into the basin, lets water trickle across her palm, then presses it against her face. The gesture is simple, unremarkable, yet it catches in your mind as if it were something delicate. A bird swoops across the courtyard, startling with its sudden movement, the flutter of wings echoing briefly. She glances upward, eyes following the path of the bird, then lowers them again. She stands, smooth and unhurried, lifting the jug once more, now lighter. The sound of shifting water inside the vessel sloshes faintly, almost playful in its inconsistency. She turns back toward the house. steps retraced across the tiles. You let your gaze drift away, toward the gate, toward the lane, as though your attention has never left. Yet the sound of her sandals against the floor lingers in your ear even after the door closes behind her. You remain still, spear in hand, the courtyard once more settling into its long, measured silence. The fountain keeps its rhythm after she has gone. Drip, pause, drip. You find yourself measuring time by it, though the sun already begins to lay warmer lines across the courtyard floor. The copper basin remains where she left it, the lip catching a sliver of light, the jug's rim gleaming faintly, as though still touched by her hand. You study it without staring, letting your gaze drift across the courtyard and return again, as if the jug were simply part of the scenery. The water inside the basin trembles, disturbed only by the slow fall from the upper spout. Each drop expands in widening rings, circles chasing each other across the surface until they blur together. You stand still, watching the endless repetition. The sound is never loud, but always present, like a quiet insistence that time is moving whether or not you wish it to. You notice how the light catches on the wet stone. Tiny sparkles flicker, then disappear, replaced by new ones with the next fall of water. The air feels cooler near the fountain, a dampness that clings to the skin and softens the morning heat. You shift slightly to catch it, leaning a little toward the shade while keeping your place by the gate. From within the house, muffled sounds reach you, the drag of a door, the faint thud of footsteps overhead, servants stirring perhaps, or shutters being opened to let in light. The noises are dull, without urgency, as though the entire household moves at the same pace as the water. Even Cairo itself, beyond the gate, seems hesitant to wake fully. A distant call of a vendor fades quickly, lost in the wide air. You let your fingers trace the shaft of the spear, not because you expect use of it, but because its familiarity steadies you. The wood bears tiny notches, reminders of times when it has leaned against stone or struck the ground to mark a warning. You know each groove, though you never count them. Your eyes drift back to the jug again, its curve smooth, its handle catching dust motes in the sunlight. The steam that had risen earlier has vanished, but you recall how it curled upward, thin as breath. You think of how she bent over the basin, how the water slid across her palm before vanishing into her skin. A guard is meant to see without dwelling, yet the mind is stubborn, storing away images the same way stone keeps heat after sunset. A pigeon lands near the fountain, cocking its head, as though in judgment of your stillness. It dips quickly, drinking with short bursts, wings twitching at each sound. The water ripples again, disturbed by more than the steady drip. You watch, then glance away, giving the bird its space. It lingers only a moment before fluttering upward, scattering dust from the tiles with its wings. The courtyard settles again. The jug rests. The basin ripples. The fountain continues. The sun climbs higher, painting the walls with slow light, shifting the shade you stand in. You adjust your stance, nothing more. The guard remains at the gate, the water continues to fall, and the day stretches ahead without haste. The first smell that reaches you is warm bread, drifting lazily from the lane beyond the gate. It slides into the courtyard like a quiet guest, sweetened with smoke from the baker's oven, wrapped in the faint scent of flour that clings to everything it touches. You stand still, letting the air carry it to you, the aroma filling the emptiness of the morning. It is not hunger that stirs you. It is simply the way smell can shift the space around you, turning silence into something softer. Soon enough, the baker's boy arrives. His footsteps scuff the stones in uneven rhythm, lighter than a grown man's stride, but brisk as though he wishes to be done quickly. A cloth-covered basket rests against his hip, its edge brushing his tunic with each bounce. He does not glance at you first. He never does. To him, a guard at the gate is no different than the wall itself. But when his eyes finally lift, he nods, a brief acknowledgement, and you return it with the same spare courtesy. The boy sets the basket down just inside the gate, and the smell of fresh flatbread blooms stronger. Steam curls faintly under the cloth, warm against the cool morning air. He does not linger, he never lingers. His fingers drum lightly against the basket rim as if to say he has completed his task, and then he slips back into the lane, vanishing as easily as he came. You do not move to uncover the bread. That is not your place. Soon a servant will come to collect it, carrying it into the kitchen where hands will tear it, dip it, share it without ceremony. But you stand in its nearness, letting the aroma cling to the air around you. The bread smells faintly charred at the edges, soft at the center, a mix that tells you the baker has done his work well. A cat appears as if summoned by the scent, thin, grey, with a tail that flicks in restless arcs. It circles the basket, cautious, eyes narrowing in suspicion at your presence. You do not move. The cat sniffs, then settles at a polite distance, watching as though waiting for a chance it will not take. You almost smile, though only inwardly, at its patience. The sounds of the lane grow louder now. A cartwheel bumps across uneven stones. A voice calls out for figs, not loudly, not yet desperate to sell. The rhythm of the city begins to build, though still far from its noisy peak. You let the sounds blend with the smell, a mix of wood smoke, flour, donkey, dust, voices, all settling in layers that belong only to these hours. The basket remains untouched for longer than expected. You begin to think of the bread cooling, steam fading into nothing, crust stiffening. But soon a servant appears, young, half-drowsy still. He lifts the basket with little care, mutters something to himself you cannot catch, and disappears with it back inside. The smell lingers even after the basket is gone, caught between the stones and in your own thoughts. You shift the spear lightly in your hand. The morning stretches onward, and with it your post remains unchanged. Bread has come and gone. The boy has vanished. The servant has returned to shadows. And still you stand, leaning a little, watching a city that does not notice. The air settles again, carrying faint traces of smoke and wheat, a reminder of the loaf you did not touch, but will remember all the same. The hours after bread are the longest. The sun has risen enough to erase the coolness, yet not enough to drive the household fully into motion. You remain at the wall, the spear steady in your hand, the courtyard heavy with waiting. Dust gathers slowly on the stones, shifting in thin swirls whenever a faint breeze drifts through the gate. It does not hurry, and neither do you. You find yourself tracing the patterns of the bricks with your eyes. Each block holds its own shade, some darker, some lighter, all worn smooth at the edges where centuries of hands have leaned. You know them well enough to notice the smallest differences, the shallow crack near your left knee, the faint chip in the mortar where a pebble lodged years ago, the dull stain that never fades no matter how much it rains. Watching these details passes the time more easily than staring at the lane, where little happens until noon. A fly circles lazily, landing on the back of your hand, then rising again when you twitch your fingers. It hums close to your ear, then vanishes into the bright air. You tilt your head slightly, following its sound, until silence returns. These are the companions of idle hours. Flies, dust, faint draughts of air, the small creaks of stone under heat. Your body begins to ache from stillness, though you do not show it. You shift weight from one foot to the other, letting your knee relax before locking again. The spear feels heavier in one hand than the other. Such adjustments are the language of guarding a quiet way of moving without appearing restless. You stand, you lean, you straighten, and the cycle repeats without end. The city beyond the gate does not press upon you. A few voices rise and fall, footsteps tap along the lane, but the true clamour of Cairo is still hours away. For now it is only fragments. A donkey brays and falls silent. A door shuts. Someone laughs once, a short burst, then nothing. You let the sounds roll through you without holding them, the way one might let a river pass without trying to drink it all. Inside the house, the silence feels heavier than before. No shutters open, no doors creak, no voices reach you. The widow's chambers are still, wrapped in their own world, leaving you outside in yours. You know better than to expect more. A guard does not wait for moments, a guard waits for nothing, and calls it service. The sun creeps higher, shadows retreating toward the fountain. The glimmer on the water grows brighter, almost harsh. You narrow your eyes against it, then look away, fixing your gaze on the far wall where shade lingers. The hours stretch like cloth pulled taut, refusing to tear, refusing to end. You breathe in, breathe out, the rhythm as steady as the drip of the fountain. Time does not rush here. Time drags its feet across stone. You stand with it, sharing its slowness, leaning against the wall, waiting without purpose, tracing bricks, counting flies, listening for sounds that never amount to more than fragments. This is the way of idle hours, and you carry them quietly, as though they were part of your uniform. From your place at the gate, the courtyard seems emptied of change. The fountain drips, the sun climbs, the same stillness hums. Yet the smallest shift catches you a flicker in the shadows above. You raise your eyes without moving your head, letting them rest on the wooden lattice that shades the balcony. Its pattern is carved to block sight as much as light, but you know how it behaves. A tilt of the head, a flutter of fabric, a momentary absence of stillness, these reveal what the wood is meant to hide. You catch it, the brief movement of her hand, not full, not waving, simply adjusting a fold of veil or tracing a finger along the frame. Small, but enough to draw you. The air around you feels denser for a moment, as if holding its breath in case you do. You do not stare. You only allow your eyes to acknowledge what they saw, then lower them again to the gate, the street, the dust. The balcony is half in sun, half in shade. Carved cedar slats cast striped shadows across the wall. You imagine her seated just beyond, in the cool part, watching the courtyard below without speaking. She does not need to speak. Her presence carries itself in the silence, in the way a shutter might shift or a hand might brush wood. She has no reason to notice you, yet you sense it, the faint echo of awareness moving between spaces. You lean the spear against your shoulder, careful, casual. Your hand rests on the wood as though nothing has changed. A fly returns, buzzing near your ear, and you almost welcome the distraction. The world remains ordinary. The fountain drips, the air warms, Cairo breathes beyond the gate, yet the single glimpse lingers in your mind like a line of ink drying on a page. A servant passes through, carrying folded linens toward the storeroom. He does not look up, does not notice the balcony, does not notice you beyond a brief nod. The door closes, and the sound echoes across stone before dying away. You return your gaze once more toward the lane, letting your eyes blur until the shapes are little more than shifting patches of light. Still, the lattice stays in the corner of your vision. You do not fixate on it, but it remains, as though it has claimed its place in the landscape just as the fountain has, just as the bricks have. A shadow stirs there now and then, but you do not turn fully. A guard knows the value of pretending not to see. The sun shifts again, beams slanting differently, cutting sharper lines across the courtyard. The wooden pattern throws long streaks onto the floor below, as though reminding you of what it hides. You breathe steadily, adjust your stance, and wait. The balcony is still again. The courtyard is unchanged, yet something has entered the day, subtle, silent, like a ripple that keeps widening long after the drop has fallen. The sun presses down more firmly now, and with it comes the hour when a guard is permitted a small meal. You do not leave your post, but a servant brings you a bowl, plain clay, still warm from the kitchen fire. Lentils, slow-cooked, soft, touched with cumin and a faint bite of garlic. The smell reaches you before the servant has even crossed halfway, and you take the bowl with a nod. Nothing more. He does not linger. No one does. A guard eats alone, as if to keep duty from mixing with comfort. You sit on the low step near the gate, setting the spear close at hand. The bowl rests in your palm, the clay heavy, almost too hot to hold. You wait a moment, letting the steam rise, fogging faintly in the air. Then you dip your fingers, scooping gently, the way you have done 1,000 times before. The lentils cling, thick, grainy, earthy, with spice that leaves a trace against your skin. You raise them slowly to your mouth, savoring the way the taste expands, nutty, smoky, edged with the sharpness of cumin. The sound of eating is quiet. A soft press of fingers against lips, A faint lick of spice, nothing more. You chew with the patience of someone who has nowhere else to be, who knows the food will not vanish if eaten slowly. Each mouthful feels the same, steady, unremarkable, yet steady enough to be comforting. The clay cools little by little, its warmth seeping into your hand until it becomes ordinary. The lane beyond carries its own meal-like scents now. Grilled onions from a nearby stall, bread baked again for later buyers, fruit rinds left to sweeten in the heat. The smells overlap, merging into a haze that feels like the city's second voice, a voice made of spice and smoke rather than words. You take another scoop, swallow, let it rest in your belly like a stone placed carefully on another stone. You glance once at the balcony, though it remains still. The lattice hides whatever may or may not be there. You do not look long. The meal commands your attention in its own quiet way. You scrape the last of the lentils from the bowl, fingers shiny with oil, the taste of garlic lingering. When you finish, you wipe your hand across the rim, then lick the last traces, savoring even the faint grit of spice caught in the lines of your skin. The bowl sits empty beside you. The spear rests once more in your grip. You breathe, slower now, fuller, as though the food has weighted your lungs with steadiness. The sun shifts again, shadows shrinking into the edges of the courtyard. You return to your place at the wall, standing as before, the same as always, yet with the calm heaviness of a meal settling quietly inside you. The house behind you has grown quieter again, though not completely still. A faint sound carries from the upper rooms, the rustle of a page turned carefully, then another. You recognize it at once. The widow is reading. She does not read aloud, but you imagine her lips moving soundlessly, shaping words to herself in the measured cadence of practice. The air of the courtyard feels different when her voice exists, even unheard. The shutters above are half open now, carved cedar, their edges cut with tiny floral designs. Through them, pale light filters into her chamber, catching the curve of her chair, perhaps the edge of a low table where she keeps her manuscripts. You cannot see her directly, but you can imagine her there, framed by shadow, her hand steady on the page, her veil slipped down enough for comfort while no one else watches. The manuscript she favors is an old one. You have seen it carried before, its binding worn, the leather faintly cracked, its pages marked with ink darkened by time. She often holds it near the window, where light is stronger, her eyes narrowing in concentration as she follows each line. You picture her doing the same now, the shutters casting narrow bands of sun across her hands, her gaze lowered, lips forming shapes only she knows. The sound of the city outside continues to build, though it does not disturb her. You hear the clatter of a cart, the call of a man offering melons, the answering laugh of children running through the lane. All of it fades against the steady rhythm of pages turning one by one, soft against her fingers. Your own stance stiffens, though you do not mean it to. The thought of her above, surrounded by words, seems heavier than stone. You adjust the spear in your grip, then lean it lightly against your shoulder, pretending disinterest. But your ears stay tuned to every rustle, to the faint click of her nails against parchment, to the hush of paper shifting in air. The widow's world is quiet, private, contained. She sits within it as though sealed, yet fragments escape. The whisper of pages, the faint glint of lamplight on ink, the brief shadow of her hand passing near the shutter. You stand in your own world, the courtyard, the gate, the endless drip of the fountain. Between the two lies only air, and yet the space feels smaller for her presence. Another page turns, another silence follows. You let your gaze wander across the lane, pretending not to notice. But you do. You always do. The courtyard feels hotter now, the sun pressing down from its high seat above the city. You shift your stance only slightly, enough to keep the spear upright without betraying restlessness. The fountain continues its patient dripping, a soft contrast to the hum of distant market cries. Somewhere a bell rings twice, and then the sound disappears. It is the hour when the shadows of palm trees shorten, yet you find yourself grateful for even the slimmest band of shade leaning against the wall. She appears again, though this time not above, but across. The widow moves slowly toward the palm at the courtyard's edge. her steps calm, measured, as if she has already decided the path will belong to her. The tree offers little cover, just a narrow strip of shadow stretching from its trunk, yet she settles into it as though it were the cool chamber of a hall. Her veil is light, drawn across her shoulders but not tight, the fabric stirring faintly in the air. You remain where you are, near the gate, but you notice how the line of shade from the wall touches the same space as the palm's shadow. Separate at first, then together if you shift just slightly. You do not move at once. You wait, as if to test whether the thought matters. Then, with the slowness of someone stretching stiff legs, you step into the narrow overlap. Shade, however meager, is always a soldier's excuse. For a while you stand like this, apart yet linked by the same band of shadow. She lowers her head, perhaps to watch her hands, perhaps only to avoid the glare. A jug rests at her side, half full, its clay surface marked with faint streaks from water spilled earlier. She touches it idly, not lifting it, only letting her fingers rest on the coolness. The silence feels different now, not heavier, not lighter, simply more shared. The fountain still drips, the city still hums, but the closeness of shade makes the air seem folded around you both. You keep your eyes forward, toward the gate, though your awareness is pulled sideways, toward the tree, toward her presence. A servant passes once, carrying figs in a basket. He looks neither at you nor her. Only at the door he approaches. The sound of his sandals fades quickly. Still, the air between you does not stir. It remains as it was, still, shaded, joined by accident, or by something else. You do not speak, neither does she, yet you do not move away either. The palm sways faintly, its fronds whispering against one another, and the two of you remain beneath it, sharing a shadow small enough to feel noticed, large enough to excuse. Evening does not announce itself loudly in Cairo. It creeps into the courtyard like a visitor who knows the house well, sliding quietly across the stones, softening the harsh edges of the day. You remain by the gate, as you have since morning, the spear in your hand, the weight of it as steady as your own breath. The heat that pressed on your shoulders all afternoon loosens now, giving way to a cooler air that carries the faint smell of smoke from distant hearths. One by one, the servants appear with lanterns. They do not speak much. They simply lift the iron hooks along the passageway, hang the glass lamps, trim the wicks, and set fire to oil that has waited since dawn. Each flame flickers at first, bending, uncertain, then steadies into a golden glow. The light spreads along the walls, tracing the carved archways, pooling on the tiles in broken circles. You watch them in silence, as though the lighting of lamps were a kind of ceremony. The courtyard feels different at once, warmer in colour, calmer in rhythm. Your shadow stretches long across the floor, distorted by each new lantern. It moves not like a guard, but like a slow creature, uncertain of its own form. You let it dance without thought, your eyes returning to the fountain, where water still falls with the same unchanging drip. Beyond the gate, the city grows quieter, but never truly still. The calls of merchants soften, children's laughter fades into the alleys, a donkey's bray lingers before it dissolves. The air outside carries smells of cooked meat, roasted chickpeas, and burning charcoal, drifting together until they are indistinguishable. You breathe them in, though lightly, letting them fade, as the courtyard's own calmness claims you again. Above, her shutters glow faintly. Not open, not closed, just tilted enough to let lamplight seep through the carved cedar. The patterns it casts spill across the outer wall, delicate shapes cut by wood and flame. You do not see her, but you know she is near. The chamber holds a presence whether she speaks or not. The faintest rustle of cloth drifts outward, so soft you might mistake it for the brush of palm leaves. The servants finish their task and vanish inside, their footsteps receding until only the quiet remains. The courtyard now belongs to stillness again. Water, stone, and flame. The lantern nearest you hums faintly, oil bubbling, then calms. You adjust the spear against your shoulder, pressing it close, letting the familiar texture of its wood steady your posture. The light deepens with each passing moment. The gold grows thicker, painting the walls as though they have been washed in honey. The tiles underfoot reflect dull gleams, broken by the wet patches left from the brief rain. Even the palm casts a heavier shadow, stretching wide across the floor, as though to remind you of its age. Your breathing slows in rhythm with the night. In the lantern glow, the courtyard feels enclosed, protected, as if the city beyond the gate cannot intrude. You stand where you always do, unchanged in stance, yet the air around you is softer, the silence fuller. Evening has wrapped itself around the house, and you are a part of its stillness, a quiet figure in the corner of a painted scene. The courtyard holds its light in a way that feels unhurried, as if the lanterns have no reason to flicker too quickly. Their flames bend gently whenever a draft slips through, and then they return to steadiness, as though the evening itself insists on calm. You remain by the gate, the spear resting close, your eyes drifting between the faint glow of the lamps and the darker patches of stone that the light does not reach. The fountain continues as always. Drip, pause, drip. You have heard it since before dawn, and you will hear it long after the lamps burn low, yet in the evening it takes on a different tone. The water seems slower, deeper, as though night has made each fall of liquid heavier. You lean slightly against the wall, steady, letting the sound carry into your bone. Then, something else folds into the silence. At first you think it might be a servant muttering, or the rustle of cloth against stone. But no, it is softer, more fragile, more deliberate. A voice, slipping out from behind the carved wooden lattice above. Not a call, not a chant, not even speech meant to be heard beyond the chamber. It is quieter than any of those things, barely more than breath shaped into sound. You know the voice at once. Low, steady, though blurred by distance, and the wood that filters it. The widow does not raise it. She lets it travel only far enough to reach the air outside her chamber, and yet it drifts down to you, clear enough to be noticed, too faint to be understood. You do not move. A guard does not tilt his head toward what he wishes to hear. You remain in place, spear in hand, posture steady, but your ear tilts inward all the same. The sound comes in pieces, a few notes of breath, a pause, another strand of words half-formed. It might be poetry, the kind copied in manuscripts with ink-stained fingers. It might be a prayer repeated softly, not for ceremony but for comfort. Or it might be nothing more than a habit, a way of keeping silence company. The words dissolve before they reach you. All you can hold is the cadence, a gentle rise, a slow fall, the weight of pauses longer than syllables. It is enough. The sound makes the courtyard feel less empty, less shaped only by stone and dripping water. You feel as though the space is filled with something unseen, something that does not belong to duty yet has entered it anyway. The lamps sway faintly, throwing shifting patterns against the walls. The carved lattice glows softly where her chamber light meets the screen, outlining floral shapes on the plaster. Each time her voice drifts outward, the glow seems brighter, as though the flame inside bends with her breath. You know this is not true, yet the illusion remains, softening the air, shaping the stillness. Beyond the gate, the city continues, but quieter now. A cart rattles once, then silence. A vendor calls figs sweet, but his voice soon fades. The lane does not intrude, it only hums faintly at the edges. Within the courtyard, her voice threads through the night, too faint to mark words, strong enough to hold attention. You breathe slower, unconsciously matching the rhythm of her pauses. Each time her voice slips out, you find yourself holding your breath until it fades again. Then you release it, quietly, evenly, as though to keep from disturbing the air. The spear feels lighter in your grip, though you do not loosen your hold. A guard is still a guard, even when listening to whispers. After a while, the murmur stops. No abruptness, no clear ending, simply silence folding back over the sound until you cannot tell where one began and the other ended. The carved lattice remains lit, the glow of her chamber steady, but her voice has returned inward, away from the night. The courtyard feels different now, not emptier, not lonely, but changed. The drip of the fountain resumes its place as the only sound, yet you notice how it echoes more than before, as if filling the space left behind. The lantern hums faintly with its oil. A pigeon shifts on the roof, feathers rustling once. Each sound feels sharper, more distinct, because the whisper is gone. You remain steady at your post. You do not look up. You do not crane your neck. You do not seek her. You stand as you always have, a figure in the corner, a spear in hand, a shadow among shadows. But inside, the sound lingers, not the words, for you never had them, only the cadence, the rise and fall, the gentle insistence of a voice meant for no one, yet carried to you all the same. You close your eyes just for a moment, as though to seal the sound in memory. When you open them, the courtyard is unchanged. Lanterns glow, water drips, shadows stretch, but you know something has passed through the space, quiet and fleeting, and you were the only one who noticed. You settle back into the rhythm of your watch. The hours will continue, as they always do. The night will deepen, the lanterns will dim, the fountain will drip, the city will breathe, but the whisper will remain, caught not in the air but in the stillness that wraps itself around you now. The courtyard feels less like stone and more like memory, and you, though unmoving, are part of that memory, standing where you always stand, listening to what you were never meant to hear. The courtyard has a way of breathing differently as night deepens. The lanterns no longer seem eager, their flames shrink a little, steady but slower, as if they too are growing tired. You stay by the gate, the spear close against your shoulder, watching the colors change. The golden pools of light on the ground fade into something softer, less sharp, blending with the darker corners. You have seen this many times before, but repetition does not make it less noticeable. If anything, you notice it more. It is then that you sense something else. Not a sound this time, but a shift in the air itself. At first it is faint, so faint you wonder if you have imagined it. Then it grows clearer, though never loud. A fragrance enters, curling through the courtyard like smoke, though there is no fire to explain it. Jasmine, you know it at once. Sweet, but not cloying. Soft, but not weak. It drifts carefully, mixing with the faint musk of wet stone and the oily scent of lantern smoke. You stand still, letting it reach you without leaning forward. It belongs to her, you do not doubt. The servants do not carry it. The market does not sell it this pure. Only she carries it. In the oil she presses into her hair, the veil that brushes her shoulders, the folds of cloth that pass close by her skin. You do not see her at once. The scent comes first, announcing her before her steps. Then the archway door opens, quiet, almost noiseless, and she moves into the courtyard. The lantern light touches her veil, showing its fabric darkened in some places by the earlier rain. She carries no jug this time, no basket, nothing of weight. She carries only her presence, and the fragrance that makes the courtyard feel less like stone and more like garden. You keep your stance steady, eyes forward, though you cannot help but measure each step she takes. She walks toward the fountain, the clay jug from before absent, her hands empty. The faint glint of a ring catches the lantern's glow for an instant, then disappears again in shadow. She pauses by the water, not bending, not washing, only standing near enough for the droplets to mist her veil. The jasmine drifts more strongly now. It mixes with the damp air, with the faint coolness that lingers after rain, with the quiet sweetness of night. You breathe it in slowly, letting it fill your chest as though it were no different from air itself. For a moment the world feels rearranged, the fountains drip, the lanterns flicker, the gates wait, all wrapped around that single fragrance. She turns back, after only a pause. Her steps are light, careful, leaving no echo against the stones. The scent lingers longer than she does, clinging to the air even after she has slipped through the door again. The wood closes gently, no thud, no scrape, just enough to mark her leaving. You remain at your post, but the courtyard is not the same. The fragrance does not vanish immediately. It holds itself against the walls, caught in the folds of your cloak, mixed into the memory of your own breath. Even as the minutes pass, Even as the fountain resumes its rhythm alone, the jasmine hovers, subtle, patient, unwilling to be erased. A cat wanders in from the lane, its paws silent on the damp stone. It sniffs the air, pauses by the fountain, then curls itself on the step where you often sit. You glance at it briefly, then return your gaze forward. The animal seems unbothered by your presence, as though it too has grown accustomed to a courtyard that is more fragrance than stone tonight. The lantern hums softly as oil shifts within. The flame bends once, straightens, and keeps burning. The fountain drops water into water, steady as breath. The cat curls tighter, tail around its body. And you stand, spear in hand, shoulders firm, still carrying the trace of jasmine in your lungs. The night stretches on, but something has already marked it. A presence that cannot be seen, only sensed. A fragrance that drifts longer than footsteps, that lingers after doors close. You do not need to look up to know she was here. The courtyard itself tells you, holding her in its air, refusing to let go too quickly. Night deepens around you with a patience you have always recognized. It does not fall suddenly, as some imagine. It slides in, little by little, until the courtyard that once seemed open is enclosed by shadow and the faint pulse of lantern light. You remain by the gate, as you always do, the spear resting against your shoulder, your body carrying the weight of the long day, without complaint. Yet you feel its muscles stiffened, feet grown sore from the same patch of stone, the faint tug of tiredness pressing at the edges of your eyes. A guard does not sleep, not at his post, but a guard is not immune to the call of weariness. The lanterns sway faintly. The air cools more than it has since dawn, and the draught that slips through the courtyard presses softly against your cloak. It stirs the fabric, lifts it slightly, only to let it fall again against your legs. The sound is small, a hush of cloth, but it reminds you of how silence can carry many layers. The drip of the fountain continues in the background, no faster, no slower, always steady, marking time without kindness, without malice. You straighten, shifting the spear from one hand to the other, more out of habit than necessity. The wood is familiar under your palm, smoothed by countless grips. You tighten your hold for a moment, then release it slightly, allowing the weight to rest against your shoulder. These tiny movements are your way of resisting the heaviness that seeps into your limbs when the hours stretch too far. Inside the house, the noise has quieted almost completely. You catch the faint creak of a door once, then nothing more. A servant settling something in the kitchen, perhaps. A shutter latched, but the widow's chamber gives no sound. Her lamp no longer shines through the lattice. The wood is dark, cut shapes barely visible against the sky. She must be at rest now, wrapped in her veil or lying still beneath her cover, her presence withdrawn into privacy. You imagine her breathing slow, steady, the kind of rhythm that a house can sense, even if it does not hear. But your own breathing is not so steady. You find it shifting between long stretches and short, as though your body cannot decide whether to settle into calm or to resist fatigue. You catch yourself blinking longer than usual, eyelids lowering more slowly. Each time you force them open again, you fix your eyes on the gate, the arch of wood and iron, the familiar shapes that anchor you to wakefulness. Still, thoughts drift where you do not intend them. The mind, unlike the body, is harder to discipline. It circles back, unbidden, to fragments of the day. Her hand against the basin, the faint rustle of her veil in the breeze, the slip of her steps on the wet tile, the smell of jasmine oil that clung to the air like smoke. You do not summon these things, but they arrive on their own, pressing themselves into the silence until you cannot keep them out. You breathe, slow and careful, as though you might steady your thoughts the same way you steady your stance. Yet even that becomes its own rhythm. Inhale, exhale, pause that reminds you of the fountain's drip, the lantern's hum, the city's distant murmur. You realize how much of your life is marked by repetition, by sounds and sights that never end but never quite change. The widow is no different. She too repeats, reading at the window, walking with her jug, pausing at the fountain, vanishing behind carved doors. And yet within that sameness lies a detail that alters everything, an unguarded glance, a trace of fragrance, the shadow of her voice through the lattice. The courtyard seems to fold inward as night thickens. The gate, once your anchor, feels more like a wall that separates you from the hum of the city. You hear Cairo faintly laughter spilling from a tavern, a cartwheel creaking along an alley, a dog barking once before being silenced. But it all feels far away. Here, in this courtyard, the world has shrunk to stone, water, and flame. You are alone, and yet not. The tiredness presses harder now. Your knees ache. The soles of your feet throb dully. The spear feels heavier, though its weight has not changed. You shift again, leaning it against the wall for a moment, while pretending you have done no such thing. You roll your shoulders once, quietly, letting the stiffness loosen before it takes hold again. Your eyes return upward without willing them to. The balcony lattice is dark, yet you search it all the same, as though expecting some small flicker of light to return. Nothing does. Still, you look again and again, finding comfort in the habit, even if it offers no reward. The night is long, and habits are what carry you through it. The lantern nearest you gutters once, smoke curling faintly against its glass. You watch the flame shrink, nearly vanish, then flare back into steadiness. The glass glows with heat, haloing the flame until it looks larger than it is. The glow spreads across the stone, painting a circle of warmth at your feet. You remain inside it, letting the light claim you. You could step aside, into shadow, but you do not. The flame feels like company, and you are unwilling to leave it. A pigeon shifts somewhere above, feathers rustling against clay tiles. You look up briefly, but the bird is hidden by the angle of the roof. Its sound is small, yet it breaks the silence just enough to remind you that you are not the only living thing awake in this hour. You let the thought linger, taking comfort in it, and so the night stretches. Your body resists sleep, your mind circles memory, your stance repeats the same small motions to keep the hours moving. The widow is at rest, the servants are silent. The courtyard belongs only to you, to stone, to water, to flame. You hold it all without protest, because this is your place. Yet beneath that duty lingers something else, a quiet that is not only weariness, but waiting. You do not name it, for naming would make it louder. You let it remain wordless, as gentle as breath, as unnoticed as the ink stains that had clung to her fingers earlier. The quiet settles around you like another garment, heavy but familiar, soft but unshakable. You know the hours ahead will not pass quickly. They never do, but you also know that morning will come, as it always has. You will stand here then, as you stand here now, carrying through silence what no one else sees, what no one else hears. The courtyard will wake again, and she will move through it again, and you will remain at your post. Until then, you keep watch not only with your eyes, but with the fragments your mind refuses to release. The fountain drips, the lantern glows, the air cools further, brushing against your cloak. You breathe once more, deeply this time, as though to assure yourself of your wakefulness. The hours continue, unbroken, unhurried, and you continue with them. The lanterns burn lower as the night presses on. Their flames are no longer eager, but smaller, steadier, as if they have learned the rhythm of the courtyard and agreed to match it. The glow softens the edges of the stones, painting everything in a patient gold. You remain by the gate, the spear leaning close against your shoulder, your body carrying the long weight of hours. The air feels thicker than before, not with heat, not with cold, but with the kind of stillness that grows heavier as time passes. It is during this late hush, when even the pigeons have gone quiet and the street beyond the gate has lost most of its voice, that you notice her again. She appears without announcement, stepping through the archway into the lantern glow. She carries nothing in her hands at first glance, no jug, no basket, no cloth folded across her arm. But when your eyes linger, careful, steady, you see what she does carry. Traces of ink. Her fingers, pale in the lamplight, are marked with smudges, dark stains pressed into the skin near her nails and along the tips. They are not heavy, not fresh, but clear enough to show she has been working at her manuscripts. You can imagine her at her low table, lamplight bending across the page, her reed pen dipping into a shallow clay pot of ink. Line by line, she has guided her hand across the parchment, copying verses with patience, with the same quiet steadiness that marks everything she does. And now the ink remains with her, carried into the courtyard as though the words themselves cling to her skin. She moves toward the fountain, as she often does, her steps measured, her veil drawn but not strict. The lantern light glimmers faintly against her ring, the same ring you notice more often in these moments than when she passes during the day. She kneels beside the basin, setting her hands against the stone, lowering them slowly into the water. The ink blurs almost at once. You see it unwind from her skin, threads of dark grey spilling into the clear surface. The drops of the fountain disturb it, breaking the stains into faint spirals that widen, dissolve, then vanish altogether. She lingers there longer than necessary, her hands spread in the water, her wrists catching the coolness as though the basin itself were what she sought rather than its cleansing. The lantern light bends across the surface, turning ripples into glimmers of gold. You remain steady, but your eyes do not leave her. You watch how the water reshapes itself around her fingers, how droplets cling to her skin when she lifts her hands again. The stains are faded now, though not gone completely. She wipes her palms across the cloth of her veil, leaving faint damp marks that will vanish soon enough in the night air. Her gestures are unhurried, almost ceremonial, as though the act of washing away ink is itself a kind of prayer. You imagine the hours that came before this moment, the quiet scratch of pen on parchment, the pooling of ink in tiny wells, the faint light straining to illuminate the page, the careful tracing of letters meant to endure longer than her own lifetime. You imagine her lips moving silently, shaping the words as she wrote them, the same way you once heard her whisper through the lattice. And now, here she is, the echo of that work carried in stains that the fountain accepts without question. The sound of the water is louder to you now. Each drop seems sharper, each ripple wider. The ink has dissolved, yet you continue to see it in memory, the grey spirals vanishing into nothing, as though her private world has touched the courtyard for only a moment before being taken back again. She rises, slow, careful, brushing her damp hands against her sleeve this time, leaving darker patches that will dry into lighter marks. Her eyes do not meet yours directly, they never do, but you sense the weight of her presence as she turns, as she crosses back toward the archway. The lantern flame behind her bends slightly, casting her shadow long across the tiles. Then she is gone, the door closing without sound. Yet the image does not leave you. You remain standing, spear in hand, body steady, but your mind lingers at the fountain, watching the grey dissolve again and again. You see her hands spreading against the water. You see droplets slipping from her fingertips. You feel the echo of her presence shaping the air around you, even when the courtyard is once more returned to stone and drip and flame. The lantern nearest you hums faintly, a sound of oil shifting within glass. You focus on it for a while, letting the steadiness calm you. The cat that had slept earlier stirs again, stretching before curling once more at the base of the step. Its tail flicks once, then stills. The city outside the gate offers only a murmur now, a single voice calling late. A donkey braying once, then silence again. The courtyard holds you. The courtyard holds her trace. The courtyard holds the ink that has vanished from the water, but not from memory. You know what ink means. Ink is permanence. It is how words survive beyond voices, how thoughts last longer than breath. Yet tonight you saw ink dissolve, vanishing in the basin as though it had never existed. And still, you carry the memory of it, proving it has not vanished at all. It has only changed where it lives. It lives now in the stones you guard, in the air you breathe, in the stillness you keep. You breathe slowly, deeply, your chest rising and falling with the same rhythm as the lantern's sway. The spear presses against your shoulder, grounding you, reminding you of what is expected. A guard does not move, does not falter, does not carry thoughts into speech. But a guard cannot keep thoughts from existing. They settle whether invited or not. Tonight, they settle like ink stains on parchment marks that will not fade even when washed. You close your eyes just briefly, allowing the sound of the fountain to fill you. You see again the spirals of grey dissolving into ripples, the water reclaiming clarity. You open your eyes once more, steady, calm, the courtyard unchanged, the lanterns still burning, the cat still curled. But within you, the memory has etched itself, quiet, indelible. The hours will pass as they always do. Dawn will come, and the courtyard will return to brightness, to bread, to voices, to ordinary rhythm. Yet this hour will remain. The hour of ink stains and water. The hour when her private world left its trace in yours. You will not speak of it. You will not signal it. You will only carry it, the way one carries the faint scent of jasmine on a cloak, or the weight of a glance caught too briefly. The night stretches on, unhurried, endless in its calm. You remain, steady at your post, yet marked all the same. The night has moved past its thickest hours, though the lanterns still hold their glow, and the fountain still keeps its dripping rhythm. You stand at your post, steady as ever, though your body carries the long weight of the watch. The spear rests against your shoulder, your cloak hangs loose, your stance repeats the small adjustments that keep weariness at bay. It is at this time when the darkness begins to give way to a thinner grey, when the city is still half asleep but already stirring, that the courtyard changes again. The first sign is sound. Not the drip of water, not the hum of lantern oil, not the distant bark of a dog in the lane. It is softer, higher, thinner. The rustle and sudden flutter of wings. Pigeons. They have nested along the roof beams for as long as you have stood this watch, and at dawn they always stir first. You hear them before you see them, coos rising low in their throats, wings scraping against clay tiles as they shift and shuffle. The sound is awkward and delicate at once, a music that belongs only to mornings in Cairo. You tilt your head slightly, looking upward without moving your body. Shadows move against the paling sky. A dozen birds, perhaps more, shuffle along the edge of the roof. Their feathers catch the early light, grey against grey, softened by the dimness of dawn. One spreads its wings, stretching, the movement loud as it cuts the air. Another follows, hopping forward, scattering dust that drifts slowly down into the courtyard. You do not mind them. Their presence is familiar, steady, almost comforting. They are as much a part of this courtyard as the fountain or the palm tree. They arrive at dawn, they leave by mid-morning, they return by dusk, and they repeat this pattern with more reliability than any servant. You watch them with a patience you rarely give to people. The shutters above have changed too. You notice it after the birds have begun their stirrings. The carved cedar panels are no longer shut tightly. They stand ajar, tilted outward just enough to catch the faint light of dawn. Through them, air flows more freely, carrying the thin coolness of morning into her chamber. You cannot see inside, but you imagine it. Her chair near the opening, her manuscript left folded from the night before, her lamp extinguished, her veil loosened while she leans forward to catch the breeze. The pigeons seem to prefer that side of the roof. They gather near the balcony, their small heads bobbing, their claws scratching against the tiles. One drops lower, landing directly on the ledge near the lattice. Its body makes the wood creak faintly, as though acknowledging its weight. The sound draws your eyes, though you do not stare openly. The bird pecks once at the wood, then ruffles its feathers, puffing out its chest. Another swoops suddenly, wings beating strong as it cuts downward, skimming across the courtyard before rising back up again. The motion startles a few others, and for a moment the air is full of feathers and sound, a rush of wings that echoes louder than you expect. Then, just as quickly, they settle again. The fountain's drip reclaims the silence, though it is joined now by the low cooing that lingers like an undertone. You keep your gaze steady on the gate, but your ears return often to the balcony. The open shutters suggest she is awake, or nearly so. You imagine her hearing the birds too, perhaps watching them from her seat, perhaps pressing her ink-stained fingers against the wood while she looks down at the courtyard. You do not know if she sees you, but the thought rests on you like a garment light, but noticeable. The smell of morning is different from the night. Dust dampened by rain, feathers, faint traces of smoke still drifting from last night's lamps, all mixed with the first sense of the city stirring. Somewhere beyond the gate, bread is already being baked again. The air carries it slowly, faint but certain, the warm sweetness mingling with the sharper scent of pigeon. You breathe it all in, steady, letting it fill your lungs without urgency. One pigeon flutters down into the courtyard itself. It lands near the fountain, head twitching side to side, eyes bright in the dim light. It pecks at the edge of the basin, then lowers itself to drink. Its beak dips quickly, repeatedly, sending ripples across the water. You watch, unmoving, while the fountain continues its dripping above. The bird pauses, ruffles its feathers, then drinks again. When it is finished, it hops twice across the tiles, pecks once at nothing, and takes flight, the sound sharp as it cuts the air. You follow its path upward until it disappears beyond the roof. The others shift restlessly, cooing louder now, as though waiting for some unspoken signal. You know that soon, when the light grows stronger, they will scatter into the city, searching for crumbs, for rooftops, for whatever small places sustain them. But for now, they remain, keeping company with you in this hour that feels stretched between night and day. Your spear presses steady against your shoulder. You adjust it slightly, feeling the familiar groove where your hand rests. Your stance is the same, your duty unchanged, yet the presence of birds makes the courtyard feel different, less empty, more alive. Their chatter fills the silence in a way that is not intrusive but steady, layering the air with sound that belongs to no one, requires no response, demands no attention. The shutters above remain open, no voice drifts through, no shadow stirs behind the lattice. But you sense her there, awake or nearly so, her chamber touched by the same morning breeze that stirs your cloak. Perhaps she watches the birds, perhaps she hears their wings as clearly as you do. Perhaps her eyes follow them as they scatter and return, the same way yours do. The fountain drips, the pigeons coo, the lanterns burn low, the gate remains closed, and you remain standing, watching the way the roof shifts with feathers, the way the balcony waits with shutters open, the way the morning creeps in little by little. The city beyond is waking, but in here the world is still caught in its quiet rhythm, and you keep watch, as always. The pigeons have settled again on the roof, their chatter softening as the grey of dawn grows brighter. You remain at your post, the spear against your shoulder, your body steady though the hours behind you are many. The air carries the freshness that lingers only for a brief time in Cairo mornings, the kind that is cool but thin, the kind that you know will vanish once the sun takes its place high above. You breathe it slowly, deeply, as though to stretch its presence for as long as possible. The lane beyond the gate has begun its day. You hear it first as scattered sounds, not yet a chorus. A single cart wheel bumping across stone, a vendor calling a low greeting to another, his voice still heavy from sleep, a donkey stamping its hooves, impatient before its load is even set. These sounds drift inward, faint and broken by the thickness of the gate, but they reach you all the same. You know each sound well. You have learned to measure the city's pulse by them. Inside the house, another rhythm begins. Doors shift open, shutters creak wider, footsteps cross the tiles. Servants move about with baskets balanced against their hips, arms folded with linens, voices low and unhurried. Their talk carries across the courtyard, not meant for you, not even meant to last beyond the moment, but present enough to fill the space. You hear them speak of ordinary things, the price of onions in the market, dearer than yesterday, the figs smaller this season, though sweeter, the laundress complaining of stains that will not lift, a scrap of news about a neighbour's daughter, a whisper about a man who argued too long over fish. These fragments do not belong to you, yet they pass through your ears like water through a sieve. You listen because listening fills the hours, not because the words carry weight. Their laughter rises once, quick and short, at some remark you do not catch. It echoes briefly, bouncing off the courtyard walls before fading. For a moment the space feels smaller, more crowded, as though voices have a way of pressing the air inward. Then the servants disappear into a side chamber, the door closing behind them, and the stillness swells again, wider than before. You are left once more with the drip of the fountain, the shuffle of pigeons, and the faint hum of a city stretching its limbs. You shift your weight from one foot to the other, careful, slow. The spear presses into your palm with familiar grooves. The wood feels heavier now, though it is no different from before. It is only the hours that make it so. You let your eyes wander across the courtyard, resting on the palm tree that stands near the fountain. Its fronds stir faintly in the breeze, casting thin shadows across the damp stone. The patterns shift with every stir, never the same, always repeating. Your gaze returns, almost against your will, to the balcony above. The shutters there are wider now, fully open, carved wood framing the darkness of the chamber within. You see no movement, no figure outlined against the light. Still, your eyes return. Habit, you tell yourself. Curiosity, perhaps. Or something less simple. The lattice is empty, yet you cannot stop watching it. The pigeons seem to prefer it too. They cluster near that side of the roof, their claws scratching faintly against clay tiles, their coos vibrating softly in their throats. One bird hops onto the balcony rail itself, its feathers puffed in the cool air. It pecks at the wood once, twice, before shaking its wings and flying off again. The lattice creaks faintly under its weight, and the sound lingers in your mind longer than it should. Another servant crosses the courtyard, this time carrying folded cloth. He mutters to himself, complaining quietly about stains and soap, his words half swallowed by the weight of the bundle in his arms. You listen, though without interest, your ears catching the rhythm of his voice more than its meaning. He disappears through the arch, the sound of his sandals fading, the air left larger and emptier in his absence. The city beyond the gate grows louder. More vendors calling now, more animals clattering against stone, more doors opening with their creaks and thuds. The morning has taken hold. Cairo begins to hum with the noise that will soon swell into full clamour. But here in the courtyard, the sounds remain softened, filtered through walls and stone. You hear them only as fragments, reminders that the world continues outside while your watch remains the same. Your eyes drift again to the balcony. Still no movement. Still only the carved wood, open to air and light. You tell yourself there is nothing to see, and yet your gaze lingers, patient, steady, waiting for something that may or may not happen. A shadow, a flutter of cloth, the faintest gesture, any trace would be enough. The fountain drips, the pigeons coo, the servants murmur, the city stirs, and you, standing as you always stand, continue to listen to voices that mean nothing, to watch for movements that never come. A guard's life is made of fragments, of small details carried forward, of silences filled with things half seen and half heard. You do not protest, you do not resent, you simply endure, because enduring is what the hours demand. The sun lifts higher, though it is not yet hot. The courtyard brightens, shadows shrinking into the corners. The lanterns burn still, though their light is pale now against the strength of morning. Soon they will be extinguished, carried back inside, their flames pinched out until evening. You look at them, one by one, their glass fogged with oil smoke, their glow paling. They seem tired, as though they too have kept the watch with you. The pigeons lift suddenly, a burst of wings beating the air, scattering feathers across the roof. Their sound is louder than any voice you have heard all morning. They rise into the sky in a loose swarm, circling once above the courtyard before vanishing beyond the rooftops. Their absence leaves the air emptier, their silence sharper. You look at the roof, now bare, the clay tiles warm under the new sun. The servants return once more, baskets now empty, their voices quieter than before. They pass without looking at you, their words about figs and onions still circling, though with less energy now. Their steps fade, and you are left alone again. You breathe slowly, letting the quiet return fully. You feel the spear pressing against your shoulder, the stone steady beneath your feet, the sun beginning its climb across the courtyard. Another day has begun, another watch continues. Another silence fills itself with fragments of voices, movements, and sounds that belong to everyone and no one. The balcony remains open, the lattice remains empty, the courtyard remains yours. The courtyard, though quiet, no longer belongs entirely to night or to morning. It is caught in that middle space where shadows grow shorter, yet the air has not taken on the weight of noon. You remain at your post, spear steady, feet pressed against familiar stone. The city beyond the gate hums more insistently now. The sounds that were scattered and hesitant earlier have woven themselves into a constant murmur. Cairo has awakened fully, and its voice reaches you in fragments, voices bargaining, animals stamping, the creak of carts on uneven lanes. You hear all of it while keeping your gaze inward. It is in this hour, when the courtyard is brighter but still carries the calm of morning, that she appears again. The widow steps through the carved door with a slow composure that does not seek to hurry or to delay. Her veil is drawn more carefully than it was in the early hours, the folds neat, the fabric covering her head and shoulders in a manner more suited to leaving the house. Behind her walks a servant, younger, carrying a small pouch tied with cord. The way he follows makes it clear she is going beyond the courtyard into the world outside. You straighten not noticeably, not in a way that would betray eagerness, but enough to make your stance more deliberate. The spear shifts slightly, its wood firm against your palm. She does not look at you as she crosses the tiles, though you sense her presence as surely as you sense the weight of the gate itself. She pauses only once, adjusting the edge of her veil near her cheek, before stepping through the archway that leads outward. You follow with your eyes, though not with your steps. Yet when she passes beyond the gate, you move as duty requires, keeping her within the frame of your watch. You do not walk beside her that would break the distance her status requires, but you keep within sight, close enough to act if needed, far enough to appear incidental. The lane beyond is already busy, though not crowded to its fullest. Merchants call from their stalls, their voices rising above the shuffle of people. The smells are stronger here than in the courtyard, bread baking again, oil heating in shallow pans, spices carried in woven baskets. Dust rises from the press of hooves and sandals, swirling in thin clouds before settling again on stone. The city wears its ordinary clothes, and yet it feels different when she is within it. She walks with steady pace, her servant trailing dutifully. You keep your distance, leaning casually near a wall when she pauses, stepping slowly forward when she moves again. To anyone else, you are merely another guard, one of many who fill the city's streets. Your presence is unremarkable, and yet your watch is fixed entirely on her. She stops at the date seller's stall. His baskets are wide and shallow, filled to the brim with fruit, some dark as earth, some golden, some nearly red. They glisten in the light, sticky with sugar, piled in heaps that seem almost too generous for the wood that holds them. The seller greets her with a voice eager but respectful. His words spill quickly, praising the sweetness of his dates, comparing them favorably to those of his neighbors. She does not reply directly. She lifts her hand, gestures lightly, allowing the servant to speak on her behalf. The servant picks up a date, presses it gently, weighs it in his palm. He asks the price, haggles softly, counts coins with deliberate care. The widow meanwhile touches one of the fruits herself, her fingers pressing its skin lightly, not with urgency but with a kind of memory. Her veil hides her expression, but the gesture is enough to tell you she is not only testing ripeness, she is touching something familiar, something she has held countless times before. You stand close enough to see, far enough not to intrude. The noise of the market fills the air around you, spice sellers calling loudly, fabric vendors clapping cloth to show its texture, children weaving between stalls with laughter sharp as bells. Yet your attention is narrowed. You watch only her hand, the slight pressure of her fingers against the fruit, the faint adjustment of her wrist as she lets it drop back into the basket. The servant gathers a small portion, tying the dates into cloth, coins exchanged with quiet finality. The seller bows slightly, his voice filled with thanks, though his eyes already turn toward the next customer. The widow does not linger. She steps away, her servant close behind, the pouch of fruit now in his keeping. For a moment she glances upward, not long, not deliberate, but long enough for her eyes to cross the space where you stand. The look is neither invitation nor dismissal. It is simply a passing acknowledgement, the recognition of shared air. And yet you feel it as weight, as though the glance has pressed itself into you more firmly than the sun against your skin. Then it is gone. Her gaze shifts back to the lane, her steps continuing, the market swallowing her presence again. You remain steady, letting her pass, your body still, and your expression unchanged. But inside, the moment lingers. You return your focus outward, scanning the stalls, the crowd, the restless donkeys, and creaking carts, all the while keeping her in your sight. She moves calmly, never hurried, never pausing longer than needed. The servant adjusts the pouch, its weight small but noticeable, and together they retrace their way toward the house. When she crosses the gate again, you are already there, your stance as constant as if you had never moved. She passes through the arch without a word. The servant follows, and the sound of their steps fades into the inner chambers. You remain in the courtyard, returning to your post, the spear once more pressed against your shoulder, your eyes once more fixed on the space that belongs to no one but you. And yet the air is not the same. It carries with it the faint sweetness of dates, thick and heavy in its way, though mingled with dust and spice. The smell lingers long after she has gone inside, just as the sound of her brief glance lingers in your memory. The courtyard resumes its stillness, but you know it has been changed again, if only for you. The fountain drips, the palm sways lightly, the lanterns burn faint in the daylight, soon to be extinguished. And you, steady as ever, stand within the silence, carrying the sweetness of fruit and the weight of a glance that will not leave. The sun had been climbing, the air warming with that steady insistence you know too well. The city's noise beyond the gate had gathered into a chorus, voices bargaining, donkeys braying, vendors rattling pans and shouting praise for figs, bread, spices, cloth. It was ordinary, endless, a rhythm you had heard on countless mornings. But then, as the light thickened across the courtyard, something unusual arrived. Not a sound this time, not a scent, not even a voice. It was the faint patter of drops. Rain. In Cairo, rain does not come often. When it does, it enters shyly, almost uncertain it belongs here. The first drops touched the tiles with hesitation. You tilted your head slightly, listening as each found its place, tap, tap, tap. At first you thought it no more than water spilling from a rooftop jar. But then you saw it. The small darkening circles spreading across pale stone. They grew, merged, shaped themselves into patches that glistened faintly in the growing light. The fountain's steady drip was joined now by a second rhythm, scattered and uneven. Together they made a song you did not expect. You stood still, letting the drops fall against your cloak, letting them mark the spear in your hand. The wood darkened where the water touched it, leaving lines like ink drawn slowly along the grain. The smell of the courtyard shifted at once. Dust, usually dry and sharp, softened under the weight of dampness. The air filled with a freshness you rarely tasted in this city. The pigeons stirred again, restless at the sudden weather. Their wings rustled against the roof, some flapping away, others pressing themselves closer to the clay tiles, as if trying to decide whether to welcome or resent the rain. A few drops reached them, darkening feathers that shone momentarily before the birds shook themselves dry. Their chatter grew louder. Though it was not alarm, it was more like curiosity, a low questioning sound they traded back and forth. The courtyard itself transformed. The palm fronds bent slightly under the damp, their edges beading with droplets that clung stubbornly before sliding down to fall with a delayed splash. The stones gleamed darker now, polished by water that had not been invited but had arrived all the same. Tiny rivulets formed, slipping into cracks, tracing paths you had never noticed before. And then she stepped out. The widow moved into the courtyard with the same calm she always carried, though now her veil was speckled almost instantly with drops. She held no jug this time, no servant trailing behind, only herself in the damp air. The cloth of her garment darkened where the rain touched it, spreading in uneven circles that made the fabric cling closer. She did not hurry. Her steps were measured, careful, but not timid. She accepted the rain as one accepts the voice of a muezzin, at dawn uninvited but undeniable. You watched her walk across the tiles. Each step left the faintest imprint of moisture, a darker mark against already darkening stone. She lifted the edge of her garment slightly to keep it from dragging, though the hem was damp regardless. Her veil shifted with the breeze, clinging and lifting by turns, giving her the look of someone both sheltered and exposed. She reached the fountain and paused. The drops fell into its basin, joining the steady rhythm of the spout. The surface rippled more wildly now, each circle colliding with another, each drop erasing the pattern left by the one before. She extended her hand, palm upward, catching the rain directly. For a long moment she held it there, as if weighing what the sky had chosen to give. The water gathered, slid across her fingers, fell again into the basin. She did not wipe her hand. She let it remain damp, shimmering faintly in the lantern glow. You did not move, though the urge pressed faintly in your chest. You held your place, steady, as though carved from the same stone that the rain was softening. You watched as she tilted her face slightly, letting a few drops find her cheek through the veil, leaving faint marks darker than shadow. She looked neither hurried nor bothered. She looked as if she had stepped into a memory. And then the slip came. She turned back toward the archway, her steps sure but slowed by wetness. The rain had made the tiles slicker than they looked. One foot slid slightly forward, her balance wavering just enough for her to reach out. Her hand extended, searching, steadying. It found yours. The touch was not long, not deliberate, not even meant, but it was firm, real, undeniable. Her fingers pressed against yours, damp from rain, warmer than the air, steadier than her footing for that brief moment. You felt it fully, not only the skin, but the weight of her presence condensed into that touch. A second later, she had regained her balance. Her hand withdrew. She continued forward, her steps corrected, her pace unbroken. The door closed softly behind her. But the moment did not close. You remained still, though your hand remembered. The dampness lingered on your skin where her fingers had pressed. It mixed with the rain, but you could tell the difference. Rain was cool, impersonal, falling from everywhere. Her touch was warm, direct, pressed into one place alone. It remained long after she had gone inside, long after the courtyard returned to its rhythm of water and silence. The rain continued for a time, never heavy, never lasting long. It draped the courtyard in silver, turned every stone into a mirror, washed dust from corners and crevices. You listened to it with patience, letting it join the fountain's song, letting it erase the sounds of the lane beyond. The city itself grew quieter, as if even Cairo paused when rain visited. Eventually, as it always does, the rain began to fade. The drops thinned, their rhythm breaking until only a few scattered taps remained. The pigeons quieted again, feathers damp but not dripping. The palm fronds shook once, releasing the last of their burden. The stones shone darker, their dampness slow to fade. The air carried that clean smell only rain can bring, a smell of earth remembered, of dust undone. You stood still, letting the silence return. The fountain alone kept dripping now, louder, in the absence of falling rain. The gate loomed as it always had, unmarked by the weather. The lantern flames, though pale in daylight, continued to flicker with stubborn endurance. And you, guard of this house, remained in your place, unchanged in stance, yet marked by something no one else had seen. Your hand remembered. The weight of her touch lingered. The warmth pressed into your palm like ink-staining parchment. You could have wiped it away easily, but you did not. You held it there, letting the memory sit, as though it were another layer of duty, silent, unspoken, but not forgotten. The rain was gone. The courtyard gleamed darker. The house behind the carved doors was quiet again. Yet you knew this hour would not fade as quickly as the water drying from the tiles. The rain has passed. Its memory lingers on the stones, on the palm fronds, in the air itself. The courtyard smells different now, washed, softened, no longer the dry dust that clings in midday, but something fresher, almost shy. The stones glisten darker, patched with uneven shapes where water has gathered and not yet vanished. The fountain drips heavier than before, its rhythm fattened by what the sky has given. Each drop lands with a more decisive sound, a plunk rather than a trickle, as though rain has reminded it of its duty. You remain at your post, the spear balanced as always, but the silence feels changed. The courtyard carries more weight, more hush, as though the air itself is aware of what just happened. The touch of her hand still lingers against yours, warmth threaded with dampness, a memory pressed into the skin more firmly than any mark. You do not move, yet you feel it, a ghost that refuses to fade, echoing long after her steps have vanished into the inner rooms. It is in this deep pause, when the rain has left but the air has not yet returned to dryness, that the voice begins. From the minaret rising beyond the rooftops, the call stretches outward. It is not hurried. It rises in long lines, wavering, steady, bending through air that still tastes of water. The voice carries across the city, above domes and alleys, slipping over walls, falling into courtyards. It folds into your ears as if it has always been waiting for them. You lower your head, not sharply, but with the slow gravity of ritual. The spear remains upright. Your stance remains firm, but your eyes soften downward to the damp stones at your feet. The call fills the courtyard, louder than the fountain, louder than the hum of the lane beyond. It is not a sound that competes. It is a sound that claims. From the balcony above, her silhouette appears once more. She does not step forward, not fully, but you see the shift of her veil in the lattice, the faint outline of her form against the carved wood. The rain has darkened her garment, but in the softened light of post-rain dawn, it looks as though the cloth itself glows. She bows her head as the call continues, still and steady, her posture holding the same gravity as the voice. The courtyard becomes a chamber without roof. The call reverberates within its walls, filling every corner, soaking into every stone. Even the pigeons, restless earlier, quiet now. Their coos cease, their wings still. The palm fronds stop their restless swaying, as though the breeze itself has grown solemn. The lantern flames bend but do not go out. For this moment, the entire house seems to breathe only with the voice. You listen. You do not try to understand words. You do not need to. What matters is rhythm, cadence, the long rising notes that bend downward, then rise again. They seem to slow time, to stretch the air between one sound and the next until you are no longer certain where silence ends and voice begins. Your chest feels heavier as you breathe in, lighter as you release, as though even your lungs have submitted to the call's command. The widow remains above, motionless, except for the faintest sway of veil against wood. Her presence does not intrude, it accompanies. The two of you stand in parallel silence, she above, you below, while the voice binds both spaces together. There is no exchange, no glance, no gesture. Only stillness, held under the same sound. When the call at last fades, it does not stop abruptly. It dissolves, trailing into thinner and thinner lines until only silence remains. That silence is heavier than the sound itself. It presses into the courtyard, into your chest, into the stones at your feet. It holds for a long moment, unbroken, as though the air must first acknowledge the absence before resuming its ordinary hum. The fountain claims the space again. Its drops fall louder now, amplified by the quiet. The pigeons stir, cooing softly, testing the air as though unsure if it is permitted to speak again. Beyond the gate, the city resumes, voices calling, carts rattling, a dog barking twice. But inside, the courtyard holds the weight of what has passed. She steps away from the balcony. You see her veil vanish from the lattice, her presence withdrawing back into the chamber. The carved wood is still once more, touched only by damp air and the softened light. Yet her absence does not remove her. It leaves a trace, the way rain leaves scent in the dust even after the stones have dried. You lift your head again, straightening fully, though your body had never slouched. The spear rests against your shoulder, its wood slick from the earlier rain. Your cloak clings faintly to your arms, though the breeze is already drying it. You look toward the gate, but your mind lingers upward. at the place where her silhouette had bowed with the voice. The palm tree shivers again as the wind returns, lighter now, carrying hints of incense from some unseen alley. The lanterns sway, their flames bowing and rising as though mimicking the call's cadence. The pigeons shuffle, reclaiming their chatter, wings brushing against clay tiles. The city hum outside grows louder, more insistent, as Cairo continues its morning. But within the courtyard, the silence is not ordinary. It carries memory now, memory of rain, memory of touch, memory of voice. These are not things you can name aloud, not things you can signal with hand or spear. They remain within you, layered upon the duty that binds your stance. A guard holds his place. A guard notices without speaking. A guard carries what others overlook. And so you remain. The rain has gone, the voice has faded, the widow has withdrawn, yet the courtyard still breathes with what has passed. You feel it in your chest, in your palm, in the silence around you. You know it will linger, even as the hours stretch forward into another day of watch. The fountain drips, the palm sways, the pigeons murmur, the lanterns hum, and you, still and steady, remain bound to it all, carrying the quiet weight of closeness too subtle to name. The courtyard has settled again into its measured silence. Rain has passed, the call has faded, and the household has retreated into its rooms. You stand at your post as you always do, spear pressed against your shoulder, feet steady against the stone that still holds the dampness of the shower. The fountain, swollen from the sky's offering, drips with a heavier voice, ripples stretching wider in its basin before breaking into stillness again. The air tastes lighter, washed clean, though already it begins to thicken with the morning sun. You notice it first at the edge of your vision, not sound this time, not fragrance, a shape resting where it had not been before. On the low step near the gate, the very step where you sometimes sit during the long hours, there lies a piece of cloth. It is folded carefully, not dropped, not abandoned. The fabric rests as though it has been placed with intention. You do not move at once. A guard does not bend eagerly. You remain standing, your eyes fixed outward, the courtyard framed in stillness. Yet your awareness circles the cloth with every breath. Its edges are straight, its fold precise, its placement deliberate. The fabric is plain at first glance, but even from your distance you see it is not without detail. Along one corner, embroidery winds in a small pattern, darker than the cloth itself. The lanterns, though faint in daylight, still burn. Their weak flames cast a gentle halo over the step, enough for the thread to catch the light. You let your eyes linger on it, though your posture remains unchanged. The embroidery is simple, but it is no accident. The curve of thread is precise, stitched by a hand that worked with care. It is not decoration offered to the world at large. It is a mark that waits to be noticed. You do not bend yet. You wait, letting the courtyard tell you whether the cloth is meant for you or whether it is only a servant's forgotten duty. But no servant arrives. No hand comes to claim it. The doors remain closed. The pigeons shift on the roof, but they do not stir the step. The cloth remains alone, deliberate in its stillness. At last, when the lane beyond the gate grows momentarily quiet and no one crosses the courtyard, you allow yourself to move. Slowly, with the same gravity you use when shifting the spear, you lower yourself to the step. Your fingers touch the cloth. It is softer than it looks, worn smooth, familiar in its way. You lift it carefully, unfolding just enough to see the embroidery more clearly. The thread forms no name, no symbol that others would recognize. It is only a curve, a flourish, something that could be dismissed as ornament. But its placement in the corner, its neatness, its deliberate care, these make it speak louder than words. You trace it lightly with your thumb, feeling the raised pattern against the weave. The thread holds firm, pressed into place by hands that had time to stitch meaning into silence. You fold it again, not as tightly as before, but with care. You place it beside your spear, leaning against the wall, as though it were only another tool resting in its place. To any other eyes, it is nothing more than cloth, left behind or stored for later use. But to you, it is a mark, a message without words, a presence left where only you would find it. You glance once toward the balcony. The lattice is closed now, the shutters drawn tighter, no light spilling through. You see no figure, no veil, no motion, yet you sense the air holding something of her, as though her absence is more deliberate than presence itself. You do not stare. You return your gaze to the gate, the lane, the faint shuffle of Cairo's morning, but your thoughts remain folded with the cloth. The fountain drips, carrying its swollen rhythm. The palm fronds sway in the breeze, scattering droplets that linger from rain. The pigeons coo, restless but unwilling to leave. The city beyond grows louder, merchants calling, children laughing, animals braying. The courtyard holds all of it, layering sound upon silence, silence upon sound. And within it, on the step beside your spear, rests the folded cloth, simple in form, heavy in meaning. You do not claim it openly. You do not hide it either. You let it remain where it is, within reach, neither denied nor displayed. You know what it is, though you will never say it. You know who placed it, though no one else will. You know what it means, though the meaning will never be spoken aloud. The cloth waits, and you wait with it. The courtyard returns to its rhythm, but you know it has been changed again. A guard stands his post, steady, silent, carrying more than the weight of a spear. He carries fragments, fragrance, touch, ink, cloth, all layered into the stillness, each unnoticed by others, each unspoken, each stored where no one can take it. And so you remain, the step at your side, the cloth folded, the embroidery pressed into your memory, as surely as if it had been stitched into your own hand. The cloth remains by your side, folded, its embroidery no louder than a breath, no more obvious than a shadow. And yet, once it has entered the courtyard, the space feels altered. The fountain still drips, the palm still sways, the pigeons still shuffle along the roof. The city beyond the gate continues its daily hum. Nothing has changed, and yet everything has. The cloth has turned ordinary stone into a place of memory, and you cannot unsee it. You remain still, your hand resting lightly on the spear, your body carrying the weight of its hours. You do not move toward the cloth, though it rests only an arm's length away. You let it exist where it is, as though distance itself is part of its meaning. The embroidery gleams faintly whenever a cloud shifts and sunlight slips through, catching the thread for an instant before shadow covers it again. That flicker feels like a signal brief, secret but certain. Servants cross the courtyard now and then, carrying baskets of fruit, pitchers of water, folded blankets stacked high. Their sandals strike the stone with soft slaps, their voices mutter about chores and errands. They glance at you, nod briefly, then vanish into doorways. None notice the cloth, or if they do, none remark upon it. It lies in the open, plain enough to be overlooked. Only you give it weight. Only you feel the silence pressed into its stitches. The morning grows louder outside. Vendors call for olives, for fish, for woven mats, their voices overlapping into a chorus that does not stop. A child's laughter rings sharp, cutting above the hum before vanishing again into distance. A donkey brays, hooves clattering against stone. Cairo is awake fully now, and the city does not care about courtyards or guards or folded cloths left quietly at gates. But you care. You hold your stance more deliberately, the spear upright, your eyes fixed forward. You know better than to look often at the balcony, but your awareness stretches toward it all the same. The lattice remains shut, carved shapes sharp against the light, revealing nothing. The shutters hide her chamber, hiding her too. Still, you feel her presence in the space between cloth and lattice, as though the courtyard itself has drawn a line that connects them. The fountain drips heavier still, swollen with yesterday's rain. The ripples are wide, circles colliding again and again, a pattern that never rests. You watch it when your eyes need a place to fall. The water accepts everything without question: dust, feathers, drops from the palm, the faintest trace of ink that once blurred into it. It accepts, and it continues. Perhaps the courtyard is no different. A breeze stirs. It slides through the gate, carrying the smells of the street bread crisping on griddles, sesame crushed in a mortar, smoke rising from damp wood. It brushes across your cloak, lifts a corner of the cloth beside you, then lets it fall again. The embroidery curves into view for just a breath before the fold hides it once more. You see it even in that instant. You will always see it. The sun climbs higher, painting stronger light across the stones. The pigeons take flight, scattering into the air with sudden force, their wings a loud rustle that echoes against walls. Feathers drift downward, caught by the breeze, landing near the fountain, near your feet, near the folded cloth. You do not bend to pick them up. You let them lie, white against the darker stone, small reminders of wings already gone. The servants pass again, this time carrying trays of bread and bowls of lentils. The smell follows them, warm, earthy, familiar. They do not linger in the courtyard, only cross it quickly before disappearing into shadow. Their voices are hushed now, as if the tasks have grown heavier with the day. You hear one mutter about the weight of jars, another curse under his breath when a corner of cloth slips. These are fragments of other lives, lives that pass across the space but never remain in it. You let them fade as you always do. The cloth, however, does not fade. It rests quietly, patient, waiting. Its presence is louder in stillness than any servant's chatter or any vendor's cry. You do not need to touch it again. You already feel it pressed into you, folded not only on stone but within the memory that you guard as carefully as you guard the gate. The sun shifts again, shadows shortening, light pressing more insistently against the walls. The embroidery catches it once more, thread gleaming like water. You glance toward the balcony only once, careful, brief. The lattice is still, the shutters closed. Yet you sense it, the invisible line between balcony and step, between her chamber and the cloth, between what is seen and what is left behind, unseen. You stand steady, the spear against your shoulder, the courtyard around you filled with ordinary sounds and ordinary movements. But nothing feels ordinary. Not the fountain, not the breeze, not the pigeons, not the gate, and certainly not the folded cloth beside you. You remain as you always do, silent, unmoving, enduring. But within you, another silence grows, one that carries more weight than noise, one that belongs not to stone or water, but to the spaces people leave behind for each other without words. The courtyard holds that silence, and so do you. The courtyard glows brighter now, the sun climbing without hesitation. Shadows shrink beneath the palm tree, beneath the fountain, beneath your own feet. The lanterns that burned stubbornly through rain and dawn are pale now, their flames weak in daylight. One servant comes at last to lift them down, pinch them out, and carry them away. Their departure leaves the air sharper, less softened by flicker. You watch as the servant folds his hands around each glass case, as though cradling a small secret, before disappearing inside. You remain by the gate. The cloth is still at your side, folded, its embroidery waiting. It has not moved, though the breeze brushes it from time to time. You keep it within reach, but not in hand, letting it rest in plain view, as though it belongs to no one in particular. Yet you know its weight even without touching it. You know it as surely as you know the heft of your spear. The city beyond grows louder. It is the hour when markets are fullest, when every lane fills with buyers and sellers and the hum of trade. Voices layer upon each other until they become a single fabric of sound. Olives, onions, jars of honey, bolts of cloth, each praised by a different tongue, each competing with the others. You hear fragments of them through the gate, rising above the steady clatter of carts and animals. Cairo speaks with its 1,000 mouths, and the sound carries inward whether invited or not. Inside the house, the day moves forward too. Servants carry jugs to and fro, sandals striking stone, voices low but unhurried. A door closes, a latch clicks, a cough escapes before being stifled. All of it is ordinary, yet in the stillness of your post, each sound feels sharper. You notice everything, because noticing is what fills the endless hours. And then you notice her again, not on the balcony, not crossing with a jug, not pausing at the fountain. She appears at the far end of the courtyard, stepping from a side door you do not often see open. The sun catches her veil at once, lighting its fabric so brightly it seems thinner, almost transparent. The folds fall neatly across her shoulders, the same careful grace she always carries. Her hands are empty, though one lingers near her sleeve as if adjusting something unseen. She does not move toward you. She does not move toward the fountain. Instead, she crosses slowly along the shaded wall, her pace calm, her head slightly lowered. She walks as though measuring the space, as though each step must align with an unseen pattern. The sound of her sandals is faint against stone, yet you hear it clearly, steady as a second pulse beneath the fountain's drip. You do not turn your head, but your eyes follow. The cloth beside you feels heavier in that moment, as if aware of her nearness. She does not look directly at you, though once her gaze passes briefly across the step, across the space where the folded fabric rests. It is not long, not deliberate, but enough to draw a line between what is hers and what is yours. She continues forward, her pace unbroken, her veil stirring lightly in the breeze. She disappears again into another door, the wood closing softly behind her. The courtyard feels larger in her absence, emptier, though nothing has truly changed. The fountain drips, the palm sways, the pigeons shuffle along the roof. The sun continues its climb, relentless, indifferent, and yet the air still carries the faint echo of her steps, the faint line of her gaze across the folded cloth. You breathe slowly, careful not to shift more than necessary. The spear presses against your shoulder, grounding you. Your hand remains near it, though your thoughts remain near the fabric at your side. You imagine her hands stitching it, thread pulled through cloth with steady patience, each curve deliberate. You imagine her folding it, placing it where you would find it, leaving no trace of hesitation. These are images you will never see, but you know them all the same. The courtyard hums quietly. Beyond the gate, Cairo calls with its 1,000 voices. Within, the house continues with its servants and their endless errands. Yet for you, the day holds only this: the folded cloth, the memory of her steps along the shaded wall, the faint echo of her glance that lingers longer than sound. Time stretches, as it always does. You endure it, as you always must. A guard does not move, does not speak, does not claim. He only stands, carries, notices. But what you notice remains, as indelible as ink, as heavy as silence. And so you keep your post, spear steady, gaze forward, the courtyard wrapped in ordinary sounds that no longer feel ordinary at all. The sun presses further into the day, sliding higher across the rooftops, until the shadows in the courtyard are nearly gone. What little remains gathers in thin strips under the palm, under the ledges, under your own cloak where you stand at the gate. The heat has not yet reached its strongest, but already the air carries weight. It presses lightly on your shoulders, a reminder of what is coming. You shift only enough to settle the spear more comfortably, careful not to betray restlessness. The fountain drips, steady, swollen from yesterday's rain. Each drop lands louder than usual, striking the water below with a firmness that echoes faintly against the walls. You let your ears follow it, marking time in circles. The pigeons are quieter now, most having left the roof to search for scraps along the city streets. Only a few remain, cooing faintly, feathers ruffling in the faint breeze that sneaks through the lane. Their absence leaves the courtyard less cluttered with sound, more open to silence. The cloth is still beside you, folded, waiting, its embroidery hidden except for the occasional glint when light bends just right. It does not call for attention, yet you feel it always. Even when you do not look at it, you know it is there. It has become part of your post, like the spear, like the gate, like the fountain's endless dripping. You keep it near but untouched, as though its meaning deepens precisely because you let it rest where it was placed. A servant crosses again, carrying a clay jug. The water inside sloshes faintly, heavy against his grip. He nods to you once, his gaze quick, uninterested, before continuing into the shaded hall. The door closes behind him, leaving the space still again. Their movements remind you how the house breathes errands in and out, always circling, never stopping. Yet none of them pause where the cloth waits. None see it as you do. And then she appears. The widow steps into the courtyard with the same calm gravity as always. Her veil is drawn loosely now, the folds soft, less rigid than before. Perhaps the heat has made her allow herself more comfort. Her pace is unhurried, her hands empty. She does not carry baskets or jugs or pages this time. She carries only herself, and that is enough to alter the space. She moves toward the fountain. The water still ripples from its endless drip, and she leans slightly forward, her hand brushing against the stone rim. She does not drink, does not wash. She only lets her fingers rest there, feeling the coolness of stone dampened by water. The lantern light is gone, replaced by sunlight, and the brightness makes the droplets along her veil visible, remnants of rain that dried slower than the fabric itself. You watch her without moving. Your stance remains steady, your gaze outward, but you sense every small detail, her fingers pressing against stone, her shoulders rising as she breathes, her veil stirring slightly with the breeze. She stands there longer than needed, as though drawing calm from the fountain's rhythm. Then she lifts her head, and her eyes pass across the courtyard. They do not meet yours directly. They travel instead along the space where sunlight strikes, where the step lies, where the folded cloth still waits. For the briefest instant, her gaze rests on it. The pause is subtle, no longer than a breath, but you see it. The line is drawn between her and what she left. And then, just as calmly, her eyes move on, returning to the fountain, then lowering again. You do not move. You let the moment settle into the air, into the stone, into the space between. The fountain drips. The palm sways faintly. A pigeon coos once and falls silent. Beyond the gate, Cairo continues, its hum voices raised, pots clattering, wheels striking uneven stones. But none of it matters here. What matters has already been placed, has already been acknowledged, even without words. She turns after a time, walking back toward the door. Her pace remains unhurried, her steps measured. The veil shifts lightly as she disappears into the shade, her presence withdrawing once more into the private chambers. The door closes with its soft wooden sigh, leaving the courtyard in silence again. You breathe slowly, steadying your chest. The spear rests firm in your grip, its weight unchanged. The cloth remains folded, its embroidery still hidden, though its meaning has grown heavier. Her glance has marked it, and by marking it, has marked you as well. You know this without needing words. The sun continues to climb. The light presses harder now, its weight stronger against the stones. The fountain glimmers brighter, its ripples flashing briefly as drops disturb the surface. The pigeons shift again, restless, preparing to leave the roof. The courtyard settles back into its ordinary rhythm, yet you know it is no longer only ordinary. You remain at your post, silent, steady, carrying the watch. But now you carry something else too, something that cannot be seen, cannot be named, yet rests heavier than the spear itself. The fountain drips, the palm sways, the cloth waits, and you, as always, endure. The sun stands higher now, pouring its weight into the courtyard. The shadows that had lingered in strips have nearly vanished, pressed into the corners, clinging beneath ledges and door frames, as if reluctant to surrender entirely. The stones gleam, darker where the rain has left its mark, brighter where they have already dried. The fountain continues its patient rhythm, each drop breaking the surface, each ripple spreading outward until it fades into another. You remain at your post, spear upright, cloak heavy with heat. The cloth is still there, folded on the step beside you, its embroidery hidden except for rare moments when sunlight bends to catch it. To anyone else it would be nothing plain, ordinary, forgettable. But not to you. To you it is louder than the market's hum, heavier than the spear, more permanent than the stone beneath your feet. The city beyond the gate surges with life. Cairo is at its midday fullness. Merchants shout with greater force now, competing for ears dulled by hours of noise. Donkeys clatter past in groups, their drivers shouting to clear the way. Children's laughter rises high and sharp, then falls into scolding voices. The smell of the air has shifted too. Morning bread has given way to stews simmering in clay pots, to roasted meats, to the bitter tang of coffee boiled strong. The city's thousand tongues and thousand scents thread into one fabric, a fabric you hear but do not touch. Inside the house, movement continues, though slower than before. The servants' voices are subdued now, as if weighed down by heat. A door closes heavily somewhere deep within. A latch clicks. Sandals scrape against tiles. Water sloshes in a jug. A cough is muffled. Each sound enters the courtyard, then disappears, leaving the fountain's drip as the only rhythm that never fails. You breathe slowly, deeply, careful not to let the weight of the hours bend your shoulders. A guard cannot sag. You shift the spear slightly, rolling it in your palm, letting the familiar grain of wood remind you of constancy. Your eyes sweep the courtyard, though they return always to the same points: the fountain, the palm, the balcony lattice, the folded cloth. Each is ordinary, each is heavy with meaning no one else will notice. And then she appears again. The widow steps into the courtyard, slower this time, as though the heat itself presses against her steps. Her veil is drawn, but looser, the fabric falling soft rather than stiff. She carries nothing, no jug, no basket, no folded page. Her hands are empty, though the memory of ink still lingers on your own. She moves toward the shaded wall where the palm's thin shadow stretches. She pauses there, not in the deepest shade, but enough to soften the sun's weight. She lifts her hand briefly to adjust her veil, her fingers brushing across her cheek. The gesture is simple, ordinary, and yet you watch it as though it were the only motion in the world. She lowers her hand again, letting it rest against her side. The cloth beside you stirs faintly with the breeze. Her eyes do not meet yours, but they pass across the step once more, across the fabric that waits there. The pause is shorter than yesterday, but still it is there. She sees it. She knows it rests where she placed it. That is enough. You remain unmoving, your face calm, your posture unchanged. The spear presses against your shoulder, its weight steady. But inside, the line drawn between step and gaze tightens. You feel it pull through the space like a thread. She turns then, moving toward the fountain. The water is brighter now, sunlight striking its ripples until they glimmer like small coins tossed again and again into the basin. She rests her hand on the stone edge, fingertips trailing along the damp surface. She does not dip them in, not this time. She only touches the stone, as if to remind herself of its coolness without claiming it. The fountain drips, louder where her presence lingers. The palm sways faintly, its fronds casting narrow shadows across her veil. You do not move, though your awareness is bound to each detail. The fold of her garment, the lift of her chest as she breathes, the curve of her hand against stone. After a time she turns again, crossing back toward the door. Her steps are unhurried, her veil stirring faintly with the air. The door closes behind her, soft as always, leaving the courtyard to silence once more. You breathe in, slow, letting the air fill your chest. You breathe out, slower still, steadying the rhythm. The spear presses firm against your palm, the cloth rests folded against the step. The fountain drips, indifferent to presence or absence. The city beyond the gate hums without pause. And yet, for you, the air carries more than it did before. It carries her pause, her glance, her hand against stone, her shadow beneath the palm. You remain as always silent, steady, unnoticed. But the silence you hold is not empty. It is layered, heavy with fragments only you have seen. The courtyard holds them too, in the same way it holds water, in the same way it holds rain, in the same way it holds light. The fountain drips, the palm sways, the cloth waits, and you, as always, endure. The courtyard at midday is a place of endurance. The sun does not hurry. It settles with patience, pressing its weight into every surface until the stones gleam and the air itself feels heavy enough to hold. You remain by the gate, the spear upright against your shoulder, your cloak still though heat seeps through its fibers. The fountain drips louder in such hours, each drop carrying the echo of stone warmed beneath it, each ripple stretching across a surface that reflects the full glare of sky. The pigeons are gone now, scattered into the lanes, hunting for crumbs and cool corners. Their absence leaves the roof bare, the tiles hot and still, the silence more absolute. The The palm fronds do not sway as often. When they do, the sound is brief. A small rustle that only deepens the stillness when it ends. The cloth beside you rests where it has all morning, folded carefully, its embroidery hidden, its weight felt even without touch. From the lane beyond, Cairo pushes its noise against the gate. Voices call in layers, overlapping until they are no longer separate. Vendors praise fish, figs, olives, cloth, honey, each one claiming theirs to be sweetest, strongest, truest. Carts rattle against uneven stones, donkeys bray, a dog barks and is silenced. The smells drift too, roasting meat, boiling lentils, the acrid smoke of damp wood catching fire. All of it arrives in fragments, pressing at the edges of the courtyard but never breaking fully inside. Inside the house, movement is slower. The servants do not chatter as they did in the morning. Their voices are hushed, their steps fewer. Now and then a jug is set down with a dull thud, or a door creaks before being latched again. The air is too thick for much more. Even silence has weight. You breathe deeply, feeling the heat fill your chest as surely as air. The spear presses harder against your palm, its wood hot now where the sun touches it. You shift slightly, enough to ease the weight on one foot, but no more. A guard does not falter, not even under the sun's steady hand. It is in this heavy hour that she appears again. The widow steps into the courtyard, slower than before, her veil drawn against the brightness. The fabric falls soft against her shoulders, the folds less rigid in heat. She carries no jug, no cloth, no parchment. She carries only herself, and even that seems enough to change the weight of the air. Her movements are calm, steady, but you notice how her hand lingers near her garment, as though ready to adjust the fabric against the press of sun. She does not move to the fountain this time. She does not move toward the palm's thin shadow. Instead, she pauses halfway across the courtyard, standing still in the full light. For a long moment she remains there, head bowed slightly, veil stirring faintly in the occasional breeze. Her stillness is deliberate, as though she is choosing to stand where no shade softens her. You remain unmoving, but your eyes trace each detail. The sunlight turns her veil almost translucent, outlining the curve of her cheek beneath. The heat darkens the hem of her garment, where dampness still lingers from the earlier rain. A bead of sweat glints briefly on her wrist before slipping into the fabric. Each detail settles into you as firmly as any command. After a time, she moves again, slower still, her steps measured toward the shaded wall. She rests her hand there, against the cool plaster, fingers spread as though to borrow calm from stone. The gesture is quiet, unnoticed by anyone but you, but it speaks more clearly than words. The wall accepts her touch, as the fountain accepted her ink, as the rain accepted her presence. Her eyes lift once, briefly. They do not meet yours, but they pass across the step where the folded cloth remains. The pause is longer this time, her gaze lingering for more than a breath. The embroidery remains hidden within the fold, yet you know she sees it, knows it waits there, knows you keep it within reach, but untouched. The silence between step and gaze deepens, heavy, binding. Then she lowers her eyes again, drawing her hand back from the wall. She turns at last toward the door, her pace calm, her veil falling neatly across her shoulder as she withdraws. The wood closes behind her, as softly as it always does. The courtyard is hers and yours again, hers in absence, yours in watch. You remain steady, spear upright, posture unchanged. But the air feels marked, as though her pause has left a stain invisible to others but permanent to you. The cloth waits by your side, the fountain drips, the palm stirs, the city hums. All is as it was, and yet none of it is the same. You breathe slowly, deliberately, carrying the silence the way you carry the spear. A guard endures, a guard notices, a guard holds what others pass by. And you do, in every fragment, in every pause, in every trace that lingers longer than sight. The fountain drips, the palm sways, the cloth waits, and you, as always, endure. The courtyard has grown silent again, but it is not the silence of night nor the light hush of morning. It is the silence of midday, thick and layered. The kind of silence that grows out of too much sound pressed against the walls until even noise collapses into stillness. Beyond the gate, Cairo hums with its 1,000 mouths, its 1,000 feet, its 1,000 hands. The city roars with business, but here, in this enclosed square of stone, the world is quieter, heavier, slower. You remain by the gate, your spear pressed against your shoulder, your cloak falling heavy in the heat. The fountain drips louder now, swollen still with rain, each drop a heavy coin tossed into its basin. The palm trees' fronds do not sway often. The air itself is too weighed down to carry them. When they do shift, the sound is brief, more like a whisper than a rustle. The pigeons are gone, scattered into the market streets where crumbs are more plentiful. Their absence leaves the roof bare and still, the tiles shimmering faintly with heat. And there is the cloth, always the cloth folded carefully at your side, resting on the low step. It has not moved, and yet its presence fills more space than the fountain, the palm, the gate. The embroidery remains hidden inside the fold, yet you feel its shape more clearly than the spear in your hand. You do not touch it, and yet you carry it always. The servants move quietly now. The weight of the sun has pressed their voices low, has slowed their steps across stone. A jug of water sloshes once, sandals scrape softly, a latch clicks closed. These are not loud sounds, but they puncture the silence like drops from the fountain, noticeable, then gone, leaving the air heavier afterward. You hear them all, you record them all. A guard does not choose what to notice. He notices everything. It is in this thick hour that she appears again. The widow steps into the courtyard from the shaded hall. Her veil is drawn, but loosely, the folds softer than in the cooler hours. The sun presses on her as it presses on you, but she does not move hurriedly. Her steps are steady, her pace calm, her head lowered just enough to soften the brightness. Her hands are empty, though one lingers lightly at her side, as if the air itself were something she needed to touch. She does not go to the fountain. She does not seek the palm's narrow shade. She does not pause at the step where the cloth rests. Instead, she begins to walk the length of the courtyard, slow, deliberate, each step measured. Her sandals strike the stone with a rhythm that matches the drip of water. Step, drip, step, drip. The sound binds itself to the courtyard until it feels like part of its structure. You do not follow her with your eyes, but your awareness clings to her as firmly as shadow clings to stone. You hear the faint brush of her garment against itself, the whisper of cloth folding and unfolding with each stride. You see the way her veil lifts slightly with each movement, catching the brief stir of air that passes through. You sense her presence filling the courtyard more fully than any voice. When she reaches the far wall, she pauses. Her hand extends outward, touching the stone, fingers spread, palm pressed flat, as if the wall itself were something to lean against, something to carry her weight. She lingers there for longer than necessary, her head bowed, her veil stirring faintly. To anyone else it would be nothing, simply a woman pausing in heat, resting for a moment. But you see more. You see the echo of her hand against the wall as clearly as you felt her hand against yours in the rain. You see the silence of her pause as something that binds itself to the courtyard, permanent, immovable. At last, she turns again. Her steps carry her back across the courtyard, slower now, the rhythm softer. She passes near the fountain, though she does not stop. She passes near the step, though her eyes do not linger. She passes into the shade, though she does not hurry to enter it. She disappears again into the hall, the door closing softly behind her. You remain, spear upright, cloak heavy, posture steady, but the air feels marked, as though her slow walk has carved something into the courtyard that cannot be erased. The cloth at your side feels heavier, as though it too absorbed her passing. The fountain drips, the palm stirs, the sun presses harder, and yet none of it feels the same. The lane beyond the gate surges again. Voices rise louder now, competing with the sun's weight. The cries of sellers overlap fish, olives, bread, cloth, until they blur into one long chant. Wheels clatter, animals bray, Children's laughter cuts sharp and vanishes. All of it presses against the gate, demanding to be heard. But you hear it only faintly. Your ears are tuned to the quieter rhythms of the courtyard, the drip of water, the press of footsteps, the whisper of cloth. You breathe slowly, evenly. The air feels hotter in your chest, but you do not falter. A guard endures. A guard notices. A guard carries what others let pass. You glance once at the cloth. Its fold has loosened slightly in the breeze, enough to show a sliver of the embroidery within. Just a curve, a fragment of thread darker than the rest. You see it clearly, though the sun catches it only for a breath before shadow hides it again. That fragment is enough. It speaks louder than any word. It ties the courtyard together, balcony to step, fountain to wall, pause to silence. The fountain drips, the palm stirs, the city hums, the cloth waits, and you, as always, endure. The afternoon loosens its grip one finger at a time, as if embarrassed to have held on so long. Light thins over the rooftops, the edges of the courtyard soften, and the stones finally stop pretending they are small sun. You remain by the gate, as you have for so many hours that the wall has almost adopted your shadow, the spear a familiar line along your shoulder. Heat leaves in slow, reluctant sighs, rising off the tiles in wavering streams you can almost see, as though the courtyard is exhaling after a long, long sentence. The fountain keeps its patience, it always does. Its voice changes as the day folds itself smaller, the drip less like coin and more like breath. Little circles reaching out in the basin and giving up before they reach the rim. You do not tell the fountain it is doing a fine job. The fountain does not need your encouragement. It has no ambition and, admittedly, the better posture. Beyond the gate, Cairo widens and narrows in waves. The day's roar has started to lean toward evening, that gentle tipping point when stalls count coins, when disputes become shrugs, when children lose their last bursts of speed and drift home in a small cloud of dust. Voices are lower, laughter when it comes is softer. Even the donkeys sound less certain they need to make an announcement. The city is still the city, but it has loosened its belt a notch. Lanterns come out like cautious stars. A servant lifts one, trims a wick, coaxes flame until it agrees to live, then another and another, placed along the passageway, at the arch, near the fountain's curve, beneath the palm. Each lamp asks for a moment, just a breath, to decide whether to flicker or to hold. Then they settle into steadiness, throwing small pools of honeyed light that overlap like quiet conversations. The glass chimneys fog at the top, a faint halo of breath where fire meets the evening. The step at your side still keeps its secret. The cloth lies folded exactly where it has chosen to exist, the embroidery turned inward as if modesty were a craft. The breeze worries one corner, lifts it a finger width, then lets it rest again. No servant has moved it. No one has thought to tidy this one square of meaning. You have not tried to own it, and you have certainly not tried to ignore it. You let it be, the way one lets a thought sit in the mind, because pushing only makes it return heavier. Dusk touches the palm first. Its fronds darken from the tips inward, then the trunk becomes a slow column. The courtyard's geometry redraws itself. Edges blur, lines soften, shadows stretch long and thin, then overlap until they decide to agree. You shift your stance one pace back into the new shade, the kind permission a guard is allowed when the sun finally remembers manners. Stone cools under your soles, just a little. Your shoulders notice. Your breath notices. You do not mention it. You simply collect the small comfort like a tax. Then she appears. No flourish, no herald, only the door's gentle thought of opening. The widow steps into the evening as if the air has been saving a precisely shaped space for her. Her veil is drawn, but loosely, the folds behaving as though the day has worn them thin. The lamplight strikes its edge and turns threads to gold for a heartbeat, then lets them be cloth again. She moves toward the fountain with no hurry at all, which in this light feels like a kind of skill. Her footsteps are quieter than mornings, softer than noons. The stones, cooling, do not bother to echo. She stops where water's breath can find her. Lantern glow sits along the basin's lip, bending around the curve, skipping once across the surface when a drop arrives. She rests her hand lightly on the rim, fingers spread, as if reading the stone's temperature the way others read lines of script. She does not wash. She has done enough washing for one day, ink, rain, doubt. She simply lets coolness travel from stone to skin, a small trade no one taxes. You do not move. Your eyes, trained on the gate, borrow the ability to see without turning. The air has that jasmine memory again, faint. So faint you could pretend it is imagination, if imagination hadn't been practicing for hours. It drifts close and then recedes, as though it too is gauging the distance that keeps things proper. From the minaret beyond the roofs, the evening call begins, thinner at first, then full. A silk thread pulled across the city's weave until everything aligns. You lower your head with the same quiet gravity you offered the morning. She bows too. Not a deep bow, not a display, only the slight inclination that means the heart has ears. For a little while, sound is the only movement, and even the lantern flames seem to listen. When the voice resolves, dusk remembers to continue. The courtyard does not ask for conversation, and thankfully none arrives. Servants have finished the day's useful noises and retreated. The market's last shouts fall short of the gate and lose courage. A stray breath of wind travels through the passage and finds your cloak, then hers, and keeps going, having nothing else to say. The palm learns a slow dance. The fountain keeps counting. The lanterns remember they are made for this. She drifts a step along the basin, then another, until her shoulder is just inside the circle of light cast by the lamp you could touch if you stopped being the wall you are. She does not look up. You do not look over. Both of you agree with silence that the courtyard is very interesting. The carved doors are particularly fascinating tonight. The gate is showing excellent posture. The basin has never dripped so convincingly. You remain at your post, she remains at hers, which at present happens to be the place where cool stone meets evening air. Silence acquires texture when it lasts. First it is blank cloth, then it is finely woven, then, if no one tears it with talk, it becomes patterned, each breath a thread, each small adjustment a motif. You hear the quiet shift of her veil when she draws it closer at the throat. You listen to the hush of your palm sliding a hair along the spear's shaft, an honest confession that wood grows heavier with hours. You register the small click of her ring against stone, an accident, a punctuation. The courtyard collects these as if it will copy them later in neat script. She moves once, only once, to lift the hem a finger's breadth away from a darker patch of tile where rain has not finished remembering itself. The gesture is practical and somehow generous. It spares the cloth, and it gives the moment something to do. You admirably resist the urge to offer advice to a tile. The tile would ignore you anyway. Lamplight thickens as dusk slips toward the deeper blue. The lattice above dark all afternoon accepts a faint inner glow, the kind that means a small lamp has been lit in her chamber. Its light arrives through the patterned wood in thin fragments, laying leafy shapes on the plaster as if a second palm had grown there. The shapes move when flame breathes. You keep your eyes where duty places them, and still the pattern finds you. Time makes a habit of lengthening when no one is speaking. You let it. Your breathing slows to match the not-quite rhythm of water. Her stillness grows absolute, then not quite, then absolute again, the micro-movements of a person who belongs to her body enough to do almost nothing with it. A cat pads in from the lane, pretends it has business with the fountain, hears the situation, decides this is dignified quiet, and curls on the warmest square of stone like a seal stamped on wax. Somewhere far off, a pot is set down too firmly. The sound arrives after its cause has been forgotten. It doesn't belong to the courtyard, so the courtyard returns it to the alley and carries on. You feel a brightness at the edge of your sight where the closest lamp throws a little gold on the spear's metal ferrule. It is a very small sunrise. It lasts a moment and dies nobly. She lifts her hand from the basin and lets it rest against the flat of the rim, the tips of her fingers hanging just beyond the edge. Lantern glow makes each nail a tiny crescent. Her other hand finds the fold of her veil at the shoulder and smooths it once, not because it needs order, but because order is a comfort some evenings. The movement reveals the briefest line of wrist. The air considers this an event and cools perceptibly, then remembers itself. Between you lies only air, full of stone coolness, lantern heat, and that whisper of jasmine that has learned humility. Had you counted tile squares, an activity not beneath a conscientious guard, you would find that the distance is sensible, far enough to be the proper number, near enough that the same breath of wind can decide it has visited both of you without seeming forward. Shared weather, shared light, shared patience, nothing else, everything else. The cloth at your side listens as well as any human, which is to say it says nothing but knows a great deal. Every so often the breeze lifts the top layer and shows you that curve of thread, a crescent, a flourish, a word that is not a word. The impulse to hide it and the impulse to keep it in the open consider a debate. Then remember the vote has already been taken. It remains where it is, making the stone a little more like memory than flaw. Her head tilts, a fraction, not a question, not an answer, only that quiet calibration people do when the world grows balanced. It sets the veil in a new, exact place, and the place feels inevitable. A moth arrives at the furthest lamp and practices disaster politely until it understands glass. The flame accepts the performance with dignity. The moth retires to whisper about it to the wall. In the lane, footsteps pass, a pair, then another pair, then a shuffle that does not decide itself into numbers. A voice begins a song under its breath and abandons it for humming. The melody loses courage and goes to find someone more talkative. Cairo, in short, behaves as usual, interested in city matters and not at all in whether a courtyard is learning how to hold two people without interrupting. Your palm adjusts on the spear again, a movement so small that a saint would need a magnifying glass to confirm it. The wood answers with a familiar warmth, the kind memory gives to simple objects that do not leave you. Your feet readjust within your sandals, searching for the cooler place on the stone because comfort, apparently, is a scholar that never stops asking questions. Your shoulders become aware of themselves, then choose not to complain. She breathes. You can tell when the veil lifts a finger's breadth and settles, when the fabric remembers gravity and obeys. The sound is not a sound. It is the suggestion of one. The fountain approves of every breath, as if it has been commissioned to keep records. It is very thorough. Lantern light deepens to the color you cannot name without ending it. The first star arrives above the roofline, not wanting attention but receiving it in spite of itself. The lattice holds steady patterns, then lets them drift. The flame inside must have shifted kindly. Shadows grow less like emptiness and more like velvet, the kind you would not touch in a market and later pretend you had. Nothing happens. This is the point. You share the evening by refusing to fiddle with it. You neither speak nor pretend you might. You do not step nearer. She does not retreat. You do not ask the stone for advice. The stone, relieved, does not offer any. There is a brief, almost accidental synchronization. Her fingers lift from the basin just as your hand eases a fraction down the spear, and it passes without ceremony, like two boats considering a nod on the Nile and deciding they already nodded yesterday. If anyone were to ask, and no one will, what the two of you did at dusk, the accurate answer would be, you stood near the same coolness and let time pass without embarrassing it. You allowed the courtyard to be the kind of room that requires no furniture and no performance. You respected the mathematics of distance. You endorsed the treaty between breath and quiet. You let the city run the external conversation while you practiced the internal one, which is older and does not insist on words. Later, when the blue has set deeper into the sky and the lamps have grown certain of their work, she steps back from the basin. The movement is unhurried, carried on the same patient rhythm that brought her there. She turns toward the passage, collects the edge of her veil where it needs collecting, and walks away without needing to announce departure to anyone, least of all to you. The door receives her with the softest thud a door can make without ceasing to be a door. The courtyard does not sigh, because the courtyard has impeccable manners. The fountain keeps its count. The palm offers a longer shadow, impressed with how far it can reach if given an opportunity. The moth tries the same pane of glass again because hope. The cloth beside you decides to be very quiet about everything it knows. You remain where you are, which is precisely where you should be, which is exactly where you have been. The spear leans into you as if to say it has enjoyed this dusk very much, and wonders whether all dusks could please be like this one. You, professional that you are, do not answer the spear. You allow your breath to take a longer route in, a slower road out. You let the cooled stone rise through your feet, as if it has finally remembered that people stand on it. Silence grows simple again, losing its pattern back to plain cloth. It has done its work. You are content to wear it the rest of the night. Outside, the city finds new appointments, lamps in lanes, meals set on trays, the subtle reweaving of the world that evening specializes in. Inside, the house lights a few more wicks, then fewer, then nearly none. The lattice above fades to a darker square. A servant crosses once with a cup and returns with nothing, which is also something. You look not at the door she used, not at the place where her hand rested, not at the water she did not touch, but at the gate, which is your way of keeping faith with all the gates you have promised to keep faith with. Your gaze does its honest circuit, hinge, iron strap, bolt, arch, beyond. It is the same gate, and it is not. You are the same guard, and you are not. Even stillness knows how to change without moving. The first coolness of true night finds its voice, and begins to speak in low tones across the stone. You accept the conversation. The lamp nearest you makes a final adjustment to its wick, and decides it has been correct all along. The cat that earlier endorsed your quiet has vanished, presumably to give another courtyard the same compliment. You forgive it. Nothing has been said, nothing has been needed. What existed was a shared hour, in which each of you allowed the other to stand within the same small architecture of light and air. It is not much, someone might say. They would be wrong, but you will not argue. The courtyard knows. The water knows. The folded cloth on the step knows in the way an object sometimes learns more than the people around it. You and she, with careful practice, pretend not to know at all. You resume the watch you never left. Night takes the courtyard in both hands and lifts it into its proper quiet. The fountain keeps time for those who do not ask the hour. The palm writes long, slow sentences across the floor with its shadow. The lamps bless the walls with the kind light that forgives even their cracks. The gate does what gates do. It waits without comment. You do what you do. You stand and keep standing. Dusk has ended, but it leaves a clean seam behind it. You feel it where your palm meets wood, where your shoulders meet your cloak, where your breath meets the air that two people have agreed to treat gently. The seam will hold. You know this not because you can prove it, but because some things do not require proof while you are holding them. The fountain, because it cannot resist a conclusion, offers one more measured drop. You decide generously that it is exactly enough. Night thickens across Cairo, settling over the narrow streets and the quiet courtyard like a velvet curtain. The air is cooler now, carrying a faint scent of jasmine and the faint residue of bread baking earlier in the day. You move slowly through the shadows, careful not to disturb the calm you've observed for hours. Every step is measured, a gentle press of your sandals against the worn stones, each sound subdued, almost absorbed by the cool night air. The lamp near the gate flickers softly, casting a warm amber halo that barely reaches the farther corners of the courtyard, leaving them in restful darkness. You pause by the fountain, listening to the soft murmur of water spilling over the edges. It is a small, consistent sound, comforting in its constancy. The night is otherwise still, save for the occasional rustle of a palm frond swaying in a slight breeze. You inhale the faint aroma of damp stone and dry earth, letting it mingle with the lingering smell of herbs from the widow's small garden nearby. Each inhalation grounds you in the moment, in the quiet rituals that have become second nature over the weeks of observing and protecting this hidden world. The widow herself is absent, yet her presence feels alive in the courtyard. You imagine her moving silently through her chambers, adjusting the folds of her dress, setting a small lantern in the alcove, humming a melody so soft it cannot leave her walls. The memory of her careful movements and subtle gestures lingers, tangible and soothing, as if the courtyard itself remembers and echoes them. You remain still, aware that your role is not to interfere, but to witness, to be the silent observer who holds these moments without claiming them. A faint wind passes through the gate, carrying distant noises from the city. Voices of late-night merchants closing their shops, the soft clatter of a cart rolling along the cobblestones, the occasional bark of a dog far off. None of it disturbs the gentle rhythm of the courtyard. You notice how shadows stretch along the walls, elongating and twisting with the flicker of the lamp. The iron gate gleams in patches where the light catches it, cold and unyielding, yet welcoming in its familiarity. You trace each edge with your gaze, feeling a quiet assurance that this space, like you, has its steady, unwavering presence. You approach the small bench near the corner of the courtyard, brushing a light layer of dust from the wooden seat. You settle there, allowing the weight of the day and the night to ease your shoulders. Your cloak gathers around you, heavy and warm against the slight chill of the evening. From this vantage, you can see the fountain's waters catch what little light falls upon them, creating dancing patterns that reflect across the courtyard walls. Each ripple is hypnotic, repetitive, reassuring, a constant amidst change, a reminder that some things endure through the hours and nights. A cat emerges from the shadows, moving with soft, deliberate steps across the stones. It pauses to sniff at the edge of the fountain before settling into a curled shape near your feet. You feel the warmth of its small body against the edge of your cloak, the faint purr vibrating quietly, an unexpected companion in the stillness. The night stretches, unbroken, with only the occasional movement of leaves or the gentle ripple of water to mark the passage of time. You are aware of every detail, the subtle creak of wood in the distant balcony, the muted glimmer of lanterns through nearby windows, the faint scent of spices carried on the breeze. The courtyard, though small, feels vast in its capacity to hold moments, memories, and silent exchanges. Each stone, each plant, each item of daily life has been touched by hands careful and deliberate, and you honor these touches with your stillness. Even in absence, there is presence. Even in shadow, there is form. You think of the widow, imagining her quiet routines, the rustle of her dress, the careful preparation of her evening tea. You allow yourself to smile faintly at the image, not with longing but with appreciation for the ordinary rituals that shape her life, and by extension the rhythm of the courtyard itself. Your eyes drift to the gate, the final threshold between this enclosed, tranquil space and the bustling city beyond. Though the streets are alive with distant sounds, the courtyard remains separate, a quiet sanctuary where small acts, filling a lantern, adjusting a window shutter, watching the fountain carry their own significance. The night deepens, drawing out the last fragments of light and warmth, settling them into the corners, and you notice how each element of the courtyard responds. The fountain ripples once more, the fronds of the palm shift, and the cat stretches languidly before curling back into its spot. You remain seated, aware of the gentle balance between presence and absence, between light and shadow, between vigilance and rest. Each breath is slow, measured, and attentive. You are part of this space, yet distinct, a witness to the quiet life that unfolds with such delicate precision. The courtyard, the widow, the subtle patterns of movement, all exist together in a harmony that requires nothing more than patient observation. The lamp flickers once, then settles into a steady glow, casting long, gentle shadows that stretch across the stones. You close your eyes briefly, letting the rhythm of the fountain and the soft hum of the night carry you towards stillness. The courtyard holds its secrets, and you honor them, understanding that sometimes quiet observation is the greatest form of presence one can offer. Night, in all its measured calm, continues to wrap the courtyard in its protective shroud, a testament to endurance, subtle beauty, and the quiet persistence of life unfolding without fanfare. Dawn arrives quietly, brushing the courtyard in shades of pale amber and soft rose. The night does not surrender abruptly. It recedes in measured increments, leaving only faint trails of shadow that cling stubbornly to the corners of the stone walls. The lamps, which held vigil all night, now dim as the first light reaches their glass panes, flickering once or twice before fading entirely. You remain still, wrapped in your cloak, aware that this transition requires patience rather than action. Every object, the fountain, the spear, the palm, holds its place in silent acknowledgement of the new day. The fountain murmurs its last ripples of night, the surface catching hints of pink and gold that spread across the basin like whispers. A drop falls from the edge and causes a tiny ripple, almost imperceptible, yet it resonates in the quiet. You watch closely, noting the rhythm of its movement. Even the palm fronds seem to respond, lifting and lowering gently as if stretching after long hours of stillness. Dew clings to each tip, sparkling faintly, a reminder of the night that has passed and the day just arriving. Your cloak, damp from the coolness of the morning, rests heavily on your shoulders. You adjust it carefully, feeling the subtle shift of fabric without disturbing the balance you've maintained through the hours. The spear remains at your side, a quiet witness to your vigil, its polished wood catching the soft light in small, patient flashes. The gate, dark iron and resolute, stands unyielding as always, framing the courtyard like an unspoken promise of order and permanence. The city beyond stirs slowly. Faint bells ring from distant towers, their resonance soft, carrying across the streets to signal the beginning of the day. Footsteps echo in alleys, careful and deliberate. A faint aroma reaches you, bread baking in ovens, roasting grains in early kitchens, the sweet tang of fruits left in the open air. Smoke curls upward from chimneys, curling in lazy spirals as if unwilling to disturb the serenity of the courtyard. You inhale quietly, allowing the scents to settle alongside the memory of the night. She has not returned, yet her presence lingers. You can feel it in the shadows she touched, in the subtle shift of air around the fountain, and in the faint echo of movement that the courtyard remembers. There is no need for her to appear. Absence alone carries its own lessons. You remain still, acknowledging her memory without longing, understanding that the courtyard has absorbed her presence and kept it for you to witness. A bird alights delicately on the fountain's edge. Its brown feathers catch the first light, and it bends its head to drink. A single ripple crosses the basin, expanding outward and fading gently. The bird pauses, shakes its wings, and takes flight. You observe silently, noting the careful precision of each motion. These ordinary details so easily overlooked by most compose a narrative that you alone can read, a silent testament to patience and attentiveness. The stones of the courtyard are now fully revealed under the soft dawn. Their ochre surfaces glow faintly, and cracks and irregularities become visible. Each imperfection tells a story, of years endured, of weathering and repair, of quiet resilience. You notice each one with care, allowing the courtyard's history to mingle with your own. You understand without needing to speak that these stones have kept secrets, carried weight, and remained steadfast through time, much like your own vigil tonight. The air grows warmer with the rising sun. Gentle breezes sweep through, carrying scents of earth, stone, and the waking city. The courtyard exhales with the day, and you follow its rhythm, your own breath matching its cadence. In this quiet, you recognize the subtle connections that bind presence, memory, and vigilance. Each moment, however small, holds significance. The courtyard has taught you to see, to listen, and to respect the weight of silence. A cat pads across the stones, its movements silent yet deliberate. It pauses at the fountain, testing the water with a tentative paw, and moves on without hesitation. You note the interaction without need for involvement. The courtyard is alive with quiet dramas, subtle shifts, and small acts of life that require nothing of you but attention. You remain still, letting these minor narratives unfold around you. The sky brightens gradually. Light spills over the rooftops, brushing the walls with warmth and dissolving the last traces of night. The fountain catches the morning glow, the water shimmering like liquid gold. Shadows stretch and fade, and the courtyard, once a realm of night and vigil, becomes a space of calm awareness, a witness to the natural rhythm of passing time. Your role tonight, like all nights, has been silent observation. You have witnessed absence and presence, memory and motion, stillness and subtle change. Each element of the courtyard, the stones, the palm, the water, the iron gate, has spoken in its own way, and you have listened without interruption. This is the culmination of patience, of vigilance exercised without expectation, of a deep respect for the quiet order that exists just beyond the reach of action. As the sun rises fully, illuminating every detail, you take one last measured breath. The courtyard, now awake with light, has fulfilled its lesson. Every lamp extinguished, every shadow reshaped, every ripple settled. You allow yourself to step back, to release the tension held through the long hours, knowing that the quiet, the observation, and the subtle communion with this space have preserved its harmony. Presence has been enough. Vigilance has been enough. Silence, the most exacting and profound of all actions, has been enough. The day has arrived, but the memory of the night lingers, folded carefully in the corners of the courtyard and in the attentive heart of its watchful sentinel. The lesson remains. Observation is not passive, patience is not weakness, and even absence carries its own quiet power. You step away slowly, leaving the courtyard intact, breathing the soft, cool air of early morning, and carrying with you the weightless knowledge that some truths are only visible in silence. The courtyard watches, the fountain whispers, the palm sways gently, and for a fleeting moment the world is held in perfect equilibrium. You walk on, carrying the quiet understanding that vigilance, presence, and patience are enduring acts, and that the lessons of the night will remain long after the first sunbeam has touched the stones. The morning continues its gentle rise, brushing the high walls of the courtyard with tender light. You take a slow breath, feeling the warmth spread across your arms and shoulders, blending with the lingering cool of night. The fountain murmurs quietly, a soft, continuous note beneath the subtle sounds of the city beginning to stir. You watch the shadows stretch and contract, delicate and patient, each one a silent companion to the rhythm of the day. The widow moves quietly in her chambers above, each gesture deliberate, measured, almost ceremonial. You notice the soft sway of her dress as she arranges a cup of tea, the subtle care in placing small objects just so, and the faint scent of jasmine that drifts down into the courtyard. It is in these unremarkable details that the intimacy of the hidden hours is revealed, a quiet understanding between spaces, between the watcher and the unseen, between the present moment and all that has come before. The courtyard breathes with the day, welcoming the first gentle steps of morning. Leaves sway lazily in a slow breeze, pigeons shift on ledges with small coos, and the stones beneath your feet carry the warmth of countless suns. Each detail folds into the next, forming a tapestry of ordinary life that is both comforting and infinite in its small complexities. You lean back, eyes half closed, and let the senses carry you: water, stone, scent, warmth, quiet motion. Nothing intrudes, nothing demands. The city waits, the day waits. The small moments of connection, the subtle harmony of ordinary life, remain steady and true. In this quiet, you feel yourself drifting, held by time's soft rhythm, carried gently toward rest. The courtyard, the widow, the fountain, and you share this slow, unbroken moment, a sanctuary of calm that will linger in memory, a gentle retreat from haste and expectation. We hope this quiet step into another time has left you feeling rested. If you've enjoyed it, you're welcome to like, share, or leave a gentle note. And if you'd like more slow walks through history, you can subscribe and join us again. End of script. Sweet dreams.